Ryan Walker thought the worst pain of his life ended 3 years ago when his wife vanished without a trace, leaving him to raise their daughter alone. But on Christmas Eve, in a crowded mall, he came face to face with the woman who destroyed him, and she was crying. Before he could react, his 5-year-old daughter broke free from his grip and ran straight into her mother's arms. What happened next would force Ryan to confront a truth that shattered everything he believed about the woman he once loved. Stay with me until the end, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights of Riverside Mall blazed with artificial cheer, competing with the genuine warmth of 1,000 Christmas decorations that transformed the sprawling shopping center into a winter wonderland. Garlands of silver and gold twisted around railings, enormous red bows adorned every storefront, and a massive Christmas tree dominated the center court, its branches heavy with ornaments that caught the light and threw it back in dancing fragments of color. Ryan Walker barely noticed any of it. He moved through the crowd with the practiced efficiency of a single father on a mission, one hand firmly gripping his daughter Mia's smaller hand, the other clutching a crumpled shopping list that seemed to grow longer every time he looked at it. His dark hair, slightly too long because he kept forgetting to schedule a haircut, fell across his forehead as he navigated around a family stopped dead in the middle of the walkway to take selfies with Santa's workshop display. "Daddy, can we see Santa?" Mia asked, her voice bright with the kind of hope that 5-year-olds possessed in abundance. Her blonde curls, so much like her mother's, though Ryan tried not to think about that, bounced as she craned her neck to look up at him. "Maybe after we finish shopping, Princess," Ryan said, his voice automatically softening the way it always did when he spoke to his daughter. "We still need to get presents for Grandpa and Aunt Sarah, remember?" Mia's lower lip jutted out in a pout that was more performative than genuine. She'd learned early that while her father rarely said yes immediately, he almost never said no permanently. It was a dance they'd perfected over 3 years, ever since it had become just the two of them against the world. 3 years. 3 years since Hannah had walked out of their lives without explanation, without warning, without even a goodbye note. 3 years of Ryan rebuilding himself one day at a time, learning to braid hair through YouTube videos, discovering which brands of peanut butter Mia would actually eat, and lying awake at night wondering what he'd done wrong. But he didn't think about that anymore. He couldn't afford to. "Look, Daddy, they have the princess dolls." Mia tugged on his hand, pulling him toward a toy store with window displays that looked like they'd been designed by someone high on sugar and Christmas spirit. Ryan let himself be dragged along, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth, despite the exhaustion that had become his constant companion. This was what mattered now. Mia's excitement, her laughter, the way her whole face lit up when she saw something that captured her imagination. She was his anchor, his purpose, his reason for getting out of bed when the weight of single parenthood felt like it might crush him. They spent 20 minutes in the toy store with Mia providing detailed commentary on every single item that caught her eye. Ryan mentally calculated his budget, trying to figure out which of her requests he could actually afford. Teacher salary plus freelance graphic design work on the weekends meant they weren't struggling, exactly, but there wasn't a lot of room for extravagance either. "Can I have the fairy castle?" Mia asked, pointing to an elaborate playset that cost more than Ryan's monthly electricity bill. "That's a pretty big present," Ryan said carefully. "What if we put it on your letter to Santa?" Mia considered this with the seriousness of a judge deliberating a life sentence. "Okay," she finally agreed, "but I really, really hope Santa brings it." They left the toy store with a smaller doll and a coloring book. Mia had insisted they buy something today and headed toward the food court. It was past noon, and Ryan could feel his blood sugar dropping. Mia, who had inherited his tendency toward hangry meltdowns, was starting to drag her feet. The food court was packed with holiday shoppers taking a break from the chaos. The smell of pizza competed with Chinese food, burgers, and something that might have been pretzels. Every table seemed occupied by families or couples, their shopping bags piled around them like defensive fortifications. Ryan was scanning for an empty spot when Mia's hand suddenly tightened around his. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice carrying a strange note that made Ryan immediately alert. "Daddy, look." "What is it, sweetheart?" "That lady." Mia pointed across the food court, her small finger trembling slightly. Daddy, she's crying. Ryan followed his daughter's gaze, expecting to see a stranger, maybe a teenager who'd just had a fight with her boyfriend, or an elderly woman who'd gotten separated from her family. Instead, his eyes landed on a woman standing near the pretzel stand, and his entire world tilted sideways. Hannah. The name hit him like a physical blow, knocking the air from his lungs. For a moment he thought he might be hallucinating, stress-induced delusion brought on by too many Christmas songs and not enough sleep. But no, it was definitely her. 3 years older, thinner than he remembered, her blonde hair longer and pulled back in a messy bun, but unmistakably Hannah, his ex-wife, the woman who'd left them, the ghost who haunted every quiet moment. She stood alone in the crowd, oblivious to the shoppers flowing around her like water around a stone. Her shoulders were hunched, her arms wrapped around herself, as if she were cold despite the mall's efficient heating system. And she was crying, not the dramatic sobbing of someone seeking attention, but the quiet, devastating tears of someone who'd forgotten that anyone might be watching. Ryan's first instinct was to turn around, to grab Mia and disappear before Hannah could see them. 3 years of silence gave him that right, didn't it? 3 years of raising their daughter alone, of explaining why mommy wasn't coming home, of watching Mia look at families with 2 parents and trying to understand why hers only had 1. But he couldn't move. His feet seemed rooted to the cheap tile floor of the food court, his hand still clutching Mia's, his heart hammering against his ribs with a force that felt almost painful. "Daddy," Mia whispered again, and now there was something else in her voice, something that made Ryan's chest constrict. Is that Mommy?" The question nearly broke him. Mia had been 2 when Hannah left, barely more than a baby. Her memories of her mother were fragmentary at best, pieced together from the few photos Ryan had kept and the stories he'd forced himself to tell, despite the pain it caused him. He'd never wanted Mia to grow up feeling abandoned, never wanted her to internalize the message that she hadn't been enough to make her mother stay. "Yes," Ryan managed, his voice rough. "That's her." He expected Mia to shrink back, to hide behind his legs the way she did when confronted with strangers. Instead, before he could process what was happening, she pulled her hand free from his grip and ran. "Mia, wait!" Ryan's shout came too late. His daughter was already weaving through the crowd, her small body darting between adults with the fearlessness of children who haven't yet learned that the world might hurt them. Ryan took off after her, his longer legs eating up the distance. But Mia had a head start and a child's ability to slip through gaps that adults had to navigate around. His heart pounded with something beyond physical exertion, a primal fear that he couldn't name, couldn't fully articulate. Mia reached Hannah before he could stop her. The little girl threw her arms around Hannah's waist, pressing her face against her mother's coat, with an abandon that suggested muscle memory older than conscious thought. Hannah gasped, her hands flying up in shock, her tears stopping as suddenly as if someone had flipped a switch. For a moment, frozen in time, mother and daughter stood locked together while the world moved around them. Shoppers hurrying past, Christmas music playing from overhead speakers, the smell of mall food court lingering in the air. Hannah's face went through a rapid succession of emotions: shock, confusion, recognition, and then something that looked like pain mixed with joy in equal measure. Ryan skidded to a stop a few feet away, breathing hard, his mind racing to catch up with what his body already knew. This was happening. After 3 years of absence, after 3 years of silence, here was Hannah, and here was their daughter, clinging to the mother who'd abandoned her as if no time had passed at all. "Mia," Ryan said, his voice coming out harsher than he intended. "Come here, now." But Mia didn't let go. If anything, she held on tighter, her small hands gripping the fabric of Hannah's coat with fierce determination. Hannah's eyes lifted to meet Ryan's, and the impact of that gaze nearly knocked him backward. He'd forgotten how blue her eyes were, the exact shade of Mia's, and how they'd always been able to see straight through whatever defenses he tried to erect. But now those eyes were different somehow, shadowed, haunted by things he couldn't begin to guess at. "Ryan," Hannah whispered, and hearing his name in her voice after 3 years of silence felt like touching a live wire. I never thought—" "Come on, Mia," Ryan said again, ignoring Hannah completely. He couldn't do this. Not here, not now, not ever. We need to finish our shopping. He reached for his daughter, intending to physically pull her away if necessary, but Mia turned her face up to him with an expression that stopped him cold. Her eyes, Hannah's eyes, were wet with tears, but her jaw was set with a stubbornness that was pure Ryan. "She's sad, Daddy," Mia said, her voice small but certain. "We can't leave her when she's sad." The simple logic of a 5-year-old. The uncomplicated compassion of someone too young to understand betrayal, abandonment, or the 1,000 ways that love could turn into hurt. Ryan wanted to explain that some sadness was earned, that Hannah had made her choices and had to live with the consequences, that they'd survived without her and didn't need her crashing back into their lives, especially not on Christmas Eve, especially not when they'd finally started to feel like they might be okay. But he couldn't say any of that. Not to Mia. Not while his daughter looked at him with such trust, such certainty that her father would do the right thing, even if she was too young to understand that sometimes the right thing was walking away. "Please," Hannah said, and the word came out broken, desperate. Her hands had lowered to rest gently on Mia's shoulders, as if she couldn't quite believe the little girl was real. "Please, Ryan, can we talk? 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking." 5 minutes? It seemed like such a small request, such an insignificant amount of time. But Ryan knew better. 5 minutes could unravel 3 years of careful healing. 5 minutes could undo all the work he'd done to build a life that felt stable, predictable, safe. "You don't get to ask for anything," Ryan said, his voice low and hard. "You gave up that right when you left." Hannah flinched as if he'd struck her, but she didn't let go of Mia. "I know," she said quietly. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking anyway. For her sake, if not mine." It was a low blow invoking Mia, and they both knew it. Ryan's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Every instinct screamed at him to grab his daughter and run, to put as much distance between them and this ghost from their past as possible. But Mia was watching him with those impossibly blue eyes, and he could see the question forming behind them. Would Daddy be kind? Would Daddy be the person he'd always taught her to be? The person who helped others, who listened, who tried to understand. The weight of his own parenting came back to bite him. 5 minutes, Ryan finally said, the words feeling like they were being dragged from somewhere deep inside his chest. "That's it. Then we're done." Hannah's relief was so palpable it was almost painful to witness. "Thank you," she breathed. "Thank you, Ryan." He didn't respond. Instead, he looked around the crowded food court, searching for somewhere they could have this conversation without an audience of holiday shoppers. His eyes landed on a small cafe tucked into a corner, one of those chain coffee shops that seem to exist in every mall in America. "There," he said, pointing. "We'll talk there." The walk to the cafe felt surreal, like moving through a dream where everything was slightly off. Ryan kept one hand on Mia's shoulder, a possessive gesture that he wasn't proud of but couldn't seem to stop. Hannah walked beside them, maintaining a careful distance, as if she understood that any attempt to get closer would shatter the fragile agreement they'd reached. The cafe was quieter than the main food court, with a handful of tables occupied by people tapping on laptops or reading books. Christmas music played here too, but softer, almost gentle. Ryan claimed a table in the back corner, away from the windows, away from the other customers, and lifted Mia into her chair with practiced ease. Hannah slid into the seat across from them, her movements tentative, uncertain. She looked smaller than Ryan remembered, diminished somehow, as if the last 3 years had worn her down in ways that went beyond the physical. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The silence stretched between them like a physical thing, heavy with all the words that had gone unsaid for 3 years. Ryan could hear his own heartbeat, fast and irregular. Beside him, Mia swung her legs under the table, her eyes moving between her parents with an expression that suggested she understood more than she should. Finally, Ryan broke the silence. "Why now?" The question came out flat, toneless. 3 years, Hannah. 3 years of nothing, and you show up on Christmas Eve? What the hell do you want? Hannah's hands trembled as she wrapped them around an imaginary cup of coffee, a nervous gesture he recognized from their marriage. "I didn't plan this," she said quietly. I didn't know you'd be here. I didn't know I've been in therapy, Ryan, working through things. And my therapist said, I don't care what your therapist said. Ryan cut her off, his voice sharp enough that Mia flinched. He forced himself to lower his volume. You left us. You left your daughter when she was 2 years old, and you never looked back. Do you have any idea what that did to her? What that did to me? Yes, Hannah whispered, and now there were tears sliding down her cheeks again. Yes, I do. I think about it every single day. I think about how I failed you both. How I failed. Ryan's laugh was bitter, caustic. That's what you call it? Failure. You didn't fail a test, Hannah. You abandoned your family. I know. Hannah's voice broke on the words. I know what I did, and I know sorry isn't enough. It could never be enough. But I need you to understand. Understand what? Ryan demanded. What could you possibly say that would make this okay? Hannah opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her eyes dropped to the table, and for a moment Ryan thought she might stand up and walk away. Part of him hoped she would. It would be easier that way, to go back to hating the memory of her rather than facing the reality of her presence. But then Mia spoke up, her small voice cutting through the tension like a knife through butter. Are you sick, Mommy? She asked, her head tilted to one side with innocent curiosity. Is that why you went away? The question was so unexpected, so achingly perceptive in the way that children could sometimes be, that both adults froze. Ryan stared at his daughter, wondering where she'd gotten that idea, while Hannah's face crumpled with an emotion he couldn't quite name. Yes, Hannah finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, sweetie, I was sick, very sick. But you're better now? Mia pressed, leaning forward with intense interest. That's why you came back? Hannah's eyes lifted to meet Ryan's, and in them he saw a plea, asking permission, asking for understanding, asking for something he wasn't sure he was capable of giving. I'm getting better, Hannah said carefully. I'm trying to be better. It's hard, and it takes a long time, but I'm trying. Ryan wanted to interrupt, to call her out on the vague non-answers, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the raw honesty in her voice. Maybe it was the way Mia was looking at Hannah with such hope, such trust. Or maybe it was the tiny, traitorous part of his heart that remembered what it felt like to love this woman before everything fell apart. What kind of sick? He asked, his voice rough, but no longer quite so hostile. What happened, Hannah? Hannah's hands were shaking so badly now that she had to press them flat against the table to keep them still. She took a deep breath, then another, as if gathering courage for a confession. Postpartum depression, she finally said, the words tumbling out in a rush. After Mia was born, I had postpartum depression. Severe. And I didn't understand it, Ryan. I didn't know what was happening to me. I thought... Her voice broke. I thought it meant I was a terrible mother. I thought it meant I didn't love you or Mia enough. And the more I tried to fight it, the worse it got. Ryan felt like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. Postpartum depression. The words echoed in his mind, pulling up memories he'd buried. Hannah's tearful nights, her distant stares, the way she'd sometimes look at Mia with an expression that seemed more like terror than love. He'd noticed, of course he'd noticed, but he'd attributed it to exhaustion, to the normal stress of new parenthood. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, and now his voice was quieter, the anger seeping away to reveal the hurt beneath. Why didn't you let me help you? Because I was ashamed, Hannah said, tears streaming freely now. Because I looked at other mothers who seemed to handle everything so easily, and I couldn't understand why I was struggling so much. Because every time I looked at Mia, I felt like I was failing her, and I thought... She swallowed hard. I thought if I left, you'd find someone better, someone who could be the mother she deserved. The confession hung in the air between them, heavy with years of pain and misunderstanding. Ryan's mind was racing, trying to reconcile this new information with the narrative he'd constructed over the past 3 years. He told himself Hannah had left because she didn't care, because she'd found something or someone more important than her family. The possibility that she'd left because she cared too much, that her love had been warped by illness into something that looked like abandonment, had never occurred to him. You should have told me, he repeated, but the accusation had lost its bite. We could have gotten you help. We could have... I couldn't think clearly, Hannah interrupted, her voice desperate with the need to be understood. That's what depression does, Ryan. It lies to you. It tells you that everyone would be better off without you, that you're a burden, that your presence causes more harm than good. And I believe those lies. God help me, I believed them so completely that leaving seemed like the kindest thing I could do. Mia had been quiet during this exchange, her eyes moving between her parents like she was watching a tennis match. Now she reached out and put her small hand over Hannah's trembling one. "But you miss us?" Mia asked, her voice impossibly gentle for someone so young. "When you went away, did you miss us?" Hannah looked down at their joined hands, her own pale and shaking, Mia's small and steady, and let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. "Every second," she said. "Every single second of every single day. I missed you so much I thought it might kill me. And maybe that's what I wanted at first. But then I got help, real help, and I started to understand that what I'd done wasn't love. It was illness. And by the time I realized that, so much time had passed that I didn't know how to come back. I didn't know if you'd want me to." Ryan sat back in his chair feeling like he'd been hollowed out and refilled with something he couldn't quite identify. Anger was still there, yes, but it was mixed now with grief, confusion, and something that might have been understanding, or at least the beginning of it. "You hurt us," he said quietly. "You hurt Mia. Do you know how many times she's asked me why her mommy doesn't love her? How many times I've had to lie and say it wasn't her fault?" "It wasn't her fault," Hannah said fiercely, leaning forward with sudden intensity. "Ryan, please, you have to make sure she knows that. None of this was her fault. She is perfect, absolutely perfect. And the fact that I couldn't see that when I was sick doesn't change how true it is." "Did you stop loving us, Mommy?" Mia asked, her voice small but direct. It was the question she'd apparently been building up to, the one that mattered more than all the others. Hannah's face crumpled. She reached across the table with both hands, not quite touching Mia but coming close, as if afraid that contact might break the spell. "Never," she said, her voice thick with tears. "Not for 1 second. Not even when I was at my sickest, when I couldn't think straight, when everything felt dark and terrible. Even then, I loved you. I loved you so much it scared me." "Then it's okay," Mia said with the simple certainty of a child who hasn't yet learned that love doesn't fix everything. "You're here now." Ryan closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the conversation, by the revelations, by the weight of 3 years' worth of pain trying to be compressed into 5 minutes. He could feel his carefully constructed defenses cracking, the walls he'd built to protect himself and Mia starting to crumble. This wasn't supposed to happen. Hannah was supposed to be the villain in their story, the woman who'd chosen herself over her family, who'd proven that love wasn't enough, who'd left them to pick up the pieces alone. The narrative was clean that way, simple. It made sense. But this, mental illness, depression, a mother who'd left because she'd believed it was the right thing to do, this was messier, more complicated, harder to categorize as simply good or bad. "My mom is sick too," Hannah said suddenly, pulling Ryan from his thoughts. "My mother. She has cancer, stage 4. The doctors say..." She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "I came home to take care of her. That's why I'm back in town. I've been here for 2 weeks trying to work up the courage to maybe see you guys. But I didn't know how. I didn't know if you'd even want to see me. And then today, I was feeling overwhelmed, and I came to the mall because it seemed less lonely than my mother's empty house, and then Mia found you," Ryan finished quietly. "And then Mia found me," Hannah agreed, a ghost of a smile touching her lips as she looked at their daughter, "just like she always did when I couldn't find myself." The reference to the past, to when they'd been a family, when Hannah would hide during bad days and tiny Mia would seek her out with the instinct of someone following a homing signal, hit Ryan harder than he expected. He remembered those moments, though he'd tried to forget them. Hannah curled up in the bedroom with the lights off, Mia toddling in with her favorite stuffed animal to keep Mommy company. He'd thought it was sweet at the time. Now he understood it had been a symptom of something much darker. "I'm sorry about your mom," Ryan said, because whatever else had happened between them, He'd always liked Hannah's mother. Eleanor had been kind to him, had welcomed him into the family, had cried happy tears at their wedding. The news that she was dying felt like another loss piled onto the ones they were already trying to process. "Thank you," Hannah said quietly. "She asks about you sometimes. About Mia. I show her the pictures from your Facebook page. I hope that's not creepy. I needed to see that you were okay, that Mia was growing up happy and healthy." Ryan hadn't known Hannah was following his social media. He'd never blocked her. It had seemed pointless when she'd disappeared so completely, but he'd never thought about her actually looking, actually keeping track of them from a distance. "How long are you staying?" The question came out before Ryan could stop it, and he immediately regretted asking. It sounded too much like interest, like caring, like he was considering something he absolutely should not be considering. "I don't know," Hannah admitted. "As long as Mom needs me. Weeks, maybe months. We're taking it day by day." "I'm sorry," Mia said suddenly, her voice sad. "I'm sorry your mommy is sick too." Hannah's composure finally shattered completely. She put her face in her hands and sobbed. Not the quiet tears from before, but the kind of crying that came from somewhere deep and broken inside. Mia looked alarmed, her eyes flying to Ryan for guidance. Against his better judgment, against every self-protective instinct he possessed, Ryan reached across the table and put his hand over Hannah's wrist. Just that. A simple touch, brief and careful. But it was enough to make her lift her head, her eyes red and swollen, her face blotchy with tears. "Thank you," she whispered, not pulling away from his touch. "Thank you for talking to me, for letting me explain. I know it doesn't change anything, but it changes some things," Ryan interrupted quietly. He pulled his hand back, already regretting the gesture, but unable to fully regret it at the same time. "It doesn't fix everything. It doesn't erase 3 years. But it changes some things." Hannah nodded, wiping at her face with the back of her hand in a gesture so familiar it made Ryan's chest ache. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the conversation settling around them like snow. Finally, Ryan glanced at his watch. More than 5 minutes had passed, significantly more. The mall would be closing in a few hours, and he still had shopping to finish. Life was calling him back, pulling him away from this suspended moment. "We should go," he said, not unkindly. "Mia needs lunch, and we still have things to do." He expected Hannah to nod, to accept the dismissal, to disappear back into whatever life she'd been living without them. Instead, Mia's hand shot up, gripping his sleeve with surprising strength. "Daddy?" she said, her voice taking on that particular tone that meant she was about to ask for something big. "Can Mommy come have Christmas with us?" The question landed like a bomb in the middle of their carefully polite conversation. Ryan's mind went blank, unable to process the request. Christmas was tomorrow. Christmas Eve was tonight. Mia was asking if the woman who'd abandoned them could just come back? Just like that? "Mia, I don't think—" Ryan started. "Please?" Mia interrupted, her eyes wide and pleading. "She's sad and alone, and it's Christmas. You always say Christmas is for family." The words hit like an arrow straight to Ryan's heart. He'd been the one to tell Mia that. He'd been the one to teach her that Christmas was about forgiveness, about bringing people together, about love that overcame obstacles. And now his own daughter was throwing his teachings back at him, asking him to practice what he'd preached. He looked at Hannah, who had gone very still, barely breathing, as if afraid that any movement might shatter this impossible moment. "Mia, it's complicated," Ryan tried again, struggling to find words that would be honest but not crushing. "Mommy has her own plans, and we have ours, and—" "I don't," Hannah said quietly. "I don't have plans. It's just going to be me and Mom, and she'll probably sleep through most of the day because of the medication." The admission made everything worse. Ryan could picture it, Hannah alone in her dying mother's house, watching the clock tick down on Christmas Day, thinking about the daughter she couldn't see and the family she'd lost. The image was almost painful in its loneliness. "Daddy, please," Mia said again, and now there were tears in her eyes. "Just for dinner, just so Mommy isn't sad on Christmas." Ryan felt trapped between his daughter's compassion and his own need for self-preservation. Letting Hannah back into their lives, even for one dinner, felt dangerous. It felt like opening a door he'd nailed shut, like inviting chaos back into the calm they'd worked so hard to achieve. But he looked at Mia's face, so hopeful, so certain that her father would do the right thing, and he felt his resolve crumbling. "I need to think about it," he finally said, the compromise feeling weak even as he spoke it. "Can you? Do you have a phone number I can call later today?" Hannah nodded quickly, pulling out her phone with trembling hands. They exchanged numbers in silence, the simple act feeling loaded with significance. Ryan saved her contact under just H, not ready to see her full name light up his phone screen. "I understand if you say no," Hannah said as she stood up, her movements tentative. "I understand that I don't have the right to ask for anything, but thank you for considering it, and thank you for letting me explain." She looked down at Mia, her expression so full of love and loss that Ryan had to look away. "Goodbye, sweetheart. Thank you for the hug. It meant more to me than you'll ever know." "Not goodbye," Mia said firmly. "See you later." It was a statement, not a question, the absolute certainty of a child who believed that wanting something badly enough could make it true. Hannah's smile was watery but genuine. "See you later," she echoed softly. Then she turned and walked away, disappearing into the mall crowd like a ghost fading in sunlight. Ryan and Mia sat at their table for a long moment, neither speaking, both processing what had just happened. "You're going to say yes, aren't you, Daddy?" Mia finally asked, her voice small. Ryan looked down at his daughter, at her hopeful face and her trusting eyes, and knew he was defeated before he even began. "Yeah, Princess," he admitted quietly. "I think I probably am." Mia's smile was bright enough to power the entire mall's Christmas lights. She threw her arms around Ryan's neck, nearly knocking over his forgotten coffee in her enthusiasm. "Thank you, Daddy. Thank you, thank you, thank you." Ryan hugged her back, pressing his face into her hair, wondering what exactly he'd just agreed to. Tomorrow was Christmas. Tomorrow, Hannah would walk into the home they'd built without her, would see how they'd survived, would be confronted with all the ways they'd learned to be okay. And he had no idea if it would heal old wounds or just create new ones. But Mia was happy. Right now, in this moment, his daughter was happier than he'd seen her in weeks. And wasn't that worth the risk? Wasn't that worth stepping outside his comfort zone and facing the woman who'd broken his heart? "Come on," he said, standing and lifting Mia out of her chair. "We still need to finish shopping, and now we need to get an extra present." "For Mommy?" Mia asked, her eyes going wide. "For Mommy," Ryan confirmed, even though the word felt strange in his mouth after 3 years of silence. They spent the rest of the afternoon shopping, but Ryan's mind was only half present. The other half kept circling back to Hannah, to the tears in her eyes, to her confession about postpartum depression, to the way she'd looked at Mia like someone seen sunshine after years of darkness. He thought about his father's words, the ones that had been echoing in his head since Mia first asked her question. "Christmas is for forgiveness, son." Maybe it was. Maybe tomorrow would be the first step towards something new, not reconciliation exactly, but understanding. Maybe they could find a way to coexist peacefully, to give Mia the gift of knowing both her parents without the shadow of abandonment hanging over everything. Or maybe it would be a disaster. Either way, Ryan realized as he watched Mia chatter excitedly about Christmas dinner, it was too late to back out now. He'd made a promise to his daughter, and he'd die before breaking it. As they left the mall, Ryan pulled out his phone and typed a brief message to the contact labeled H. "Dinner tomorrow at 6. Address is the same." The response came almost immediately. "I'll be there. Thank you, Ryan. You have no idea what this means to me." But he did know. He knew exactly what it meant, because once upon a time, he'd have felt the same way about getting a second chance with the person he loved most in the world. The question was whether that person still existed under 3 years of hurt and absence, or if they'd both changed too much to find their way back to anything resembling what they'd once had. Tomorrow, he'd find out. Ryan buckled Mia into her car seat, listening to her excited chatter about Christmas and presents and Mommy coming to dinner. In the front seat, he gripped the steering wheel and took a deep breath. "Okay," he whispered to himself. "Okay. We can do this." Behind them, the mall's Christmas lights blazed against the darkening sky, marking the end of Christmas Eve and the beginning of something Ryan couldn't yet name, something that felt both terrifying and inevitable, like standing at the edge of a cliff and knowing you're about to jump. The drive home from the mall felt longer than usual, though the route was exactly the same as always. Ryan's hands gripped the steering wheel with unnecessary force, his knuckles white against the black leather. Behind him, Mia sang along to the Christmas carols playing on the radio, her voice sweet and slightly off-key, blissfully unaware of the storm churning in her father's mind. What had he done? What had he just agreed to? The question circled through Ryan's thoughts like a vulture waiting for something to die. Maybe his sanity, maybe his carefully constructed peace, maybe the protective walls he'd spent 3 years building around his heart. Inviting Hannah to Christmas dinner seemed like the kind of impulsive decision that would make perfect sense in a holiday movie and absolutely no sense in real life. He pulled into the driveway of their modest 2-story house, the one he'd bought 6 months after Hannah left, because living in their old apartment had felt like drowning in memories. The Christmas lights he and Mia had hung last weekend blinked cheerfully from the roofline, and a wreath made from Mia's handprints decorated the front door. It was home. Their home, built from the ashes of what used to be. And tomorrow, he was inviting the person who'd burned it all down to come inside. "Can we make cookies tonight, Daddy?" Mia asked as he unbuckled her from the car seat. "For Santa and for Mommy?" Ryan managed a smile that felt only slightly forced. "Sure, Princess. We can make cookies." Inside, the house smelled like the pine-scented candles Ryan had been burning all week, trying to create the perfect Christmas atmosphere. The tree stood in this corner of the living room, decorated with an eclectic mix of ornaments collected over years. Some from Ryan's childhood, some from the brief years of their marriage, and many newer ones marking milestones that only he and Mia had shared. While Mia changed out of her mall clothes and into the reindeer pajamas she insisted on wearing despite it only being late afternoon, Ryan stood in the kitchen and stared at his phone. Hannah's number glowed on the screen, a connection to a past he'd tried so hard to bury. He should call his sister. Sarah would talk sense into him, would remind him of all the reasons this was a terrible idea. She'd been there through the worst of it, had flown in and stayed for 2 weeks after Hannah left, had helped him figure out daycare and cooking and how to French braid hair well enough that Mia wouldn't get teased at preschool. Sarah had every right to be furious that he was even considering this. But he didn't call her. Instead, he opened the refrigerator and began pulling out ingredients for dinner, letting the familiar routine calm his racing thoughts. Mia bounded into the kitchen 20 minutes later, her energy seemingly limitless. "What are we making for Christmas dinner tomorrow?" she asked, climbing onto one of the bar stools at the counter. "Something special, right? Because Mommy's coming?" Ryan set down the chicken he'd been about to season. "What do you think we should make?" Mia's face scrunched up in concentration, a gesture she'd inherited from him. "Turkey?" she suggested. "Like at Thanksgiving? And mashed potatoes? And those green beans you make with the crispy onions?" "That sounds good," Ryan agreed, mentally calculating whether he had time to shop for all of that tomorrow morning. "We'll need to go to the store early." "I'll help," Mia volunteered enthusiastically. "I'm a good helper, right, Daddy?" "The best helper," Ryan confirmed, reaching over to ruffle her hair. They made dinner together, just spaghetti and frozen meatballs, nothing fancy, and ate while watching a Christmas movie that Mia had seen approximately 700 times but still found hilarious. Ryan tried to focus on the screen, tried to lose himself in his daughter's laughter, but his mind kept drifting back to Hannah's face in the mall. The tears, the trembling hands, the raw vulnerability when she talked about postpartum depression. He'd failed her. The realization sat heavy in his stomach, making the pasta taste like sawdust. He'd been her husband, had promised to support her in sickness and health, and he'd been so consumed with being a new father that he'd missed the signs of his wife falling apart. But she'd also failed him, hadn't she? Failed them both. Walking away without explanation, without giving him a chance to help, without trusting him enough to be honest about what she was going through. The competing narratives warred in his head, victim and villain, abandoner and abandoned, sick woman and absent mother. Nothing was as simple as he thought it was this morning, when Hannah had still been just a ghost from his past, instead of a complicated, broken person asking for a second chance. After dinner, they made cookies. Chocolate chip, because those were Mia's favorite. The kitchen filled with the warm smell of baking, and flour ended up everywhere despite Ryan's best efforts to contain it. Mia insisted on decorating some of the cookies with icing and sprinkles, turning them into abstract art pieces that were more sugar than substance. "This one is for Mommy," Mia announced, holding up a cookie that had so many sprinkles it was barely visible beneath them. "She'll like it, right?" Ryan looked at the cookie, lopsided and enthusiastic and made with pure love, and felt his throat tighten. "She'll love it," he said quietly. After cookies came bath time, then teeth brushing, then the elaborate bedtime routine that had evolved over 3 years of single parenthood. Ryan read 3 stories, one more than usual because it was Christmas Eve and Mia had deployed her most devastating puppy dog eyes. Then he tucked her in, made sure her nightlight was on, and kissed her forehead. "Daddy?" Mia's voice stopped him at the door. "Are you sad about Mommy coming tomorrow?" The question caught him off guard. He turned back to see Mia propped up on one elbow, her blue eyes, Hannah's eyes, watching him with concern beyond her years. "I'm not sad," Ryan said slowly, coming back to sit on the edge of her bed. It's complicated, Princess." "Because she went away?" "Yeah, because she went away." Mia was quiet for a moment, processing. "But she was sick," she finally said. "People can't help being sick. You told me that when I got the flu." Ryan had to smile at the child logic, even as it skewered him. "You're right. People can't help being sick." "So we should forgive her, right? Like in the Christmas story? Like how they forgave Scrooge even though he was mean?" When had his daughter become so wise? Ryan wondered. When had she learned to distill complex adult emotions into simple truths? "We'll try," Ryan said, smoothing back her hair. "We'll try to forgive her." "Good," Mia said, satisfied. She yawned hugely, her eyes already starting to close. "I already forgived her. She's my mommy." Ryan sat there for a long time after Mia fell asleep, watching her breathe in the dim glow of the nightlight. She looked so peaceful, so certain that tomorrow would be wonderful, simply because she'd decided it would be. He envied that certainty, that ability to trust so completely. Finally, he stood and left the room, pulling the door mostly closed behind him. Downstairs, the house felt too quiet, too empty. He cleaned up the kitchen, putting away the cookies and loading the dishwasher, moving on autopilot while his mind spun in circles. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Merry Christmas Eve, little brother. How's my favorite niece?" Ryan stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. "She's good. Excited about tomorrow." He hesitated, his thumbs hovering over the keyboard, then added, "We ran into Hannah at the mall today." The response was almost instantaneous. "What? Are you okay? Is Mia okay?" "We're fine," Ryan typed. "It was unexpected." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "Do you want to talk about it?" Ryan did and didn't want to talk about it in equal measure, but Sarah deserved to know, especially since "I invited her to Christmas dinner," he typed quickly before he could lose his nerve. This time the phone actually rang. Sarah's face appeared on the screen, her expression a mix of concern and disbelief. "You invited her to what?" "Hi to you too," Ryan said, settling onto the couch with a sigh. "Ryan, what the hell? After everything she did? After she abandoned you and Mia for 3 years without a word?" Sarah's voice was sharp, protective. She'd never forgiven Hannah for leaving, had deleted every photo of her from family albums, had pointedly referred to her as that woman for the past 3 years. "I know," Ryan said tiredly. "I know it sounds crazy." "It doesn't sound crazy. It is crazy. Please tell me this was Mia's idea and you just couldn't say no to her." Ryan winced. "It was Mia's idea," he admitted. "But Sarah, you should have seen Hannah. She was crying in the middle of the mall, and when she saw us, when she saw Mia—" He broke off, struggling to find words. "She has postpartum depression. That's why she left. She thought we'd be better off without her." There was a long silence on the other end. When Sarah spoke again, her voice was softer but still skeptical. "Postpartum depression doesn't give someone a pass on abandoning their family, Ryan. Yes, it's a real illness and it's serious, but there are treatments, there's therapy, there's medication. She had options besides just disappearing." "I know," Ryan said again, I'm not saying what she did was okay. I'm just saying it's more complicated than I thought. And you think one Christmas dinner is going to fix 3 years of damage? No, Ryan said quietly. I don't think it's going to fix anything, but Mia asked, and I couldn't tell her no. You know how she is. Sarah sighed heavily. I do know how she is. That kid could convince anyone to do anything with those eyes. She gets that from you, by the way. You had the same puppy dog look when we were kids. Despite everything, Ryan smiled. I did not. You absolutely did. How do you think you got me to take the blame that time you broke Mom's vase? They talked for a few more minutes, Sarah extracting a promise that Ryan would call her immediately if the dinner went south. And I'm coming over the day after Christmas, she declared. I need to assess the damage in person. After they hung up, Ryan sat in the quiet living room, staring at the Christmas tree lights. They blinked in a pattern, blue, white, red, green, hypnotic and soothing. He remembered picking out this tree with Mia, how she'd insisted on the one that was slightly crooked because it looked sad and needed a home. His daughter had a gift for seeing the lonely, the broken, the ones who needed help. Maybe that's what she'd seen in Hannah today. Not the mother who'd abandoned her, but a person in pain who needed forgiveness. Ryan's phone buzzed again. This time it was from Hannah. I can't sleep. I keep thinking about today. About Mia. She's so beautiful, Ryan. You've done an amazing job with her. He stared at the message for a long time before responding. She asks about you sometimes. I always told her you loved her, even when you weren't here. Thank you for that. I don't deserve it, but thank you. Ryan typed and deleted 3 different responses before finally settling on, See you tomorrow at 6. We're having turkey. I'll bring wine and dessert and anything else you need. Just bring yourself, Ryan typed, then immediately regretted how that sounded. Too intimate, too much like an invitation to be part of their lives again, rather than just a guest at one dinner. But the message was sent, and he couldn't take it back. He forced himself to go to bed, though sleep felt impossible. His mind kept replaying the day, Hannah's tears, Mia's hug, the revelation about postpartum depression, the weight of his daughter's hand in his as she asked if Mommy could come for Christmas. When he finally did drift off, his dreams were fragmented and strange. Hannah, walking through their old apartment, Mia as a toddler reaching for a mother who kept disappearing like smoke, the mall decorated with lights that blazed too bright and hurt to look at. He woke at 6 in the morning, earlier than necessary, his heart pounding from dreams he couldn't quite remember. Mia was still asleep, her room quiet when he checked on her. The house felt suspended in that pre-dawn stillness, waiting for the day to truly begin. Christmas morning, and Hannah was coming to dinner. Ryan made coffee and stood at the kitchen window, watching the sky gradually lighten from black to deep blue to pale gray. Snow had fallen overnight. Not much, just enough to dust the lawn and trees with white, making everything look clean and new. A fresh start, he thought, then immediately felt ridiculous for assigning metaphorical meaning to weather patterns. By 7, Mia was awake and bouncing off the walls with Christmas excitement. They opened presents in the living room, nothing extravagant, but enough to make Mia squeal with delight. The fairy castle from the toy store was there, purchased late last night during an emergency run after Mia fell asleep. Her joy made the credit card hit worth it. Santa really brought it, she exclaimed, already pulling pieces out of the box. Daddy, can we build it before Mommy comes? I want to show her. We'll start it after breakfast, Ryan promised. But we need to go shopping first, remember, for dinner? The grocery store was predictably chaotic on Christmas morning, full of last-minute shoppers who'd forgotten cranberry sauce or realized they needed more butter. Ryan navigated the crowds with practiced efficiency, Mia riding in the cart and providing running commentary on everything they passed. They bought a turkey, already defrosted and ready to cook, potatoes, green beans, cranberry sauce, both canned and fresh cranberries because Ryan wasn't sure which one Hannah preferred, ingredients for stuffing, gravy mix because Ryan had attempted homemade gravy once, and it had been a disaster, rolls, and at Mia's insistence, ingredients for hot chocolate. Because Mommy used to make it for me when I was little. Ryan didn't remember Hannah making hot chocolate. Mia had been so young when Hannah left, but he didn't correct her. Maybe it was a real memory. Maybe it was something Mia had constructed from wishes and fragments. Either way, they bought cocoa and marshmallows. Back home, the turkey went in the oven, filling the house with the smell of roasting meat and herbs. Ryan moved through the kitchen like a machine, prepping side dishes, setting the table with the nice plates they almost never used, trying not to think too hard about what was coming. Mia worked on her fairy castle at the coffee table, occasionally calling out questions or showing Ryan her progress. The normalcy of it helped. This was just another day, just another Christmas, just dinner with a guest who happened to be Mia's mother. Except it wasn't, and pretending otherwise was exhausting. By 4 o'clock, Ryan found himself changing clothes for the third time. Nothing felt right. The button-down was too formal, like he was trying too hard. The t-shirt was too casual, like he didn't care. He finally settled on a dark green Henley and jeans, presentable but not overdressed. "You look nice, Daddy," Mia said when he came downstairs. She'd insisted on wearing her Christmas dress, red velvet with white trim, her hair in 2 neat braids that Ryan was privately very proud of. "You look beautiful, Princess," he said, meaning it completely. 5:30 came and went. Ryan found himself watching the clock, his stomach twisted in knots. The turkey was resting, the potatoes were keeping warm, everything was ready. All they needed was... The doorbell rang at precisely 6 o'clock. For a moment, Ryan couldn't move. He stood frozen in the kitchen, listening to Mia's excited footsteps running toward the front door. This was it. No more hypotheticals, no more wondering. Hannah was here, standing on their porch, about to enter the life they'd built without her. "Daddy, Mommy's here!" Mia's voice carried through the house, high and excited. Ryan forced his feet to move, walking toward the entryway on legs that felt made of wood. Mia had already opened the door, and there was Hannah, snow-dusting her dark coat, her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. Her face carefully made up in a way that suggested she'd spent as much time getting ready as Ryan had. She held a wine bottle in one hand and a bakery box in the other, and when her eyes met Ryan's over Mia's head, he saw his own nervousness reflected back at him. "Hi," Hannah said softly. "Thank you for having me." "Hi," Ryan managed. "Come in. It's freezing out there." Hannah stepped inside, and suddenly the house felt smaller, more crowded. She looked around, taking in the changes, the different furniture, the photos on the walls that marked years she'd missed, the life that had continued without her. "Your home is beautiful," she said, her voice catching slightly on the word your instead of our. Mia grabbed Hannah's hand, pulling her toward the living room. "Come see my fairy castle. Santa brought it and Daddy helped me build it." Ryan took Hannah's coat and the wine, hanging one in the closet and carrying the other to the kitchen. His hands were shaking slightly, and he gripped the bottle harder to still them. He could hear Mia chattering in the living room, her voice bright with excitement, and Hannah's softer responses. When he returned to the living room, Hannah was crouched beside the fairy castle, listening intently as Mia explained the function of each turret and tower. She looked up when Ryan entered, and something in her expression made his breath catch, a mixture of grief and gratitude that was almost painful to witness. "It's an impressive castle," Hannah said, straightening up. "You did a great job building it." "Daddy helped," Mia said generously, "but I did most of it." "I can tell," Hannah said with a small smile. "You always were good at building things." The comment suggested memories Ryan didn't share, a past with Mia that he couldn't verify. It felt strange, this reminder that Hannah had known their daughter before he'd become the sole parent, that there were 2 years of Mia's life that both her parents remembered even if Mia didn't. "Dinner's ready whenever we want to eat," Ryan said, breaking the moment. They moved to the dining room, an awkward procession of 3 people trying to figure out how to be together. Ryan had set the table with 3 places, him at one end, Mia on the side, and Hannah at the other end, a safe distance. A reminder that they were no longer the family they'd once been. Hannah helped carry dishes from the kitchen, moving carefully, as if afraid she might break something. Mia kept up a steady stream of conversation, filling the silence with stories about school, her friends, the Christmas pageant where she'd been an angel. "You should have seen her," Ryan found himself saying as he carved the turkey. "She had the biggest wings of anyone in the show." "Because I was the best angel," Mia said proudly. The most modest angel, too, Ryan teased, and Mia giggled. Hannah watched them with an expression that Ryan couldn't quite read. Love and loss tangled together, joy at seeing them, but pain at all she'd missed. When they finally sat down to eat, she seemed to gather herself, deliberately brightening her expression. "This looks amazing, Ryan," she said, looking at the spread of food. "You've become quite the cook." "YouTube tutorials and a lot of trial and error," Ryan said, passing her the potatoes. "Though Mia would tell you we had pizza for dinner more nights than we should have." "Only sometimes," Mia said loyally, "and Daddy's spaghetti is really good." They ate, and slowly, gradually, some of the tension began to ease. Conversation flowed more naturally, helped along by Mia's constant questions and observations. Hannah asked about Ryan's teaching job, careful to avoid anything too personal. Ryan asked about Hannah's mother, and Hannah's expression shuddered briefly before she answered. "She's comfortable," Hannah said quietly. "The hospice nurses are wonderful. She was sleeping when I left, but I told her where I was going. She was glad." "I'm sorry you're going through that," Ryan said, and meant it despite everything else. "Thank you," Hannah whispered. After dinner, Mia insisted they have hot chocolate, even though everyone was full from the meal. Hannah's face lit up when Mia made the request, and she joined Ryan in the kitchen to help prepare it. They worked in careful choreography, maintaining distance, avoiding accidental touches. But once, when Hannah reached for the milk at the same moment Ryan did, their hands brushed. The contact was brief, barely a second, but Ryan felt it like an electric shock. "Sorry," Hannah murmured, pulling back. "It's fine," Ryan said, his voice rougher than intended. They brought the hot chocolate to the living room, where Mia had curled up on the couch looking sleepy despite her excitement. The fairy castle stood on the coffee table, its small lights twinkling in the dimness. Ryan had turned on only the Christmas tree lights, creating a soft, warm atmosphere. "This is nice," Hannah said softly, settling into the armchair, notably not on the couch where Ryan and Mia sat. "Thank you again for letting me be here." "Mommy?" Mia's voice was getting drowsy, her head leaning against Ryan's shoulder. "Can you tell me a story, like you used to?" Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "You remember that?" "Kind of," Mia said. "I remember your voice. It was nice." "I'd love to tell you a story," Hannah said, her voice thick with emotion. And so Hannah began to speak, her voice soft and melodic, telling a story about a brave princess and a dragon who just wanted to be friends. Ryan listened, and memories flooded back, nights when Hannah would read to baby Mia, her voice carrying through the apartment, the three of them crowded together in the nursery rocking chair. How had they lost this? How had something that felt so solid, so permanent, crumbled into nothing? Mia's eyes drifted closed as Hannah spoke, her breathing evening out into sleep. The story wound down, and silence filled the room. Ryan carefully shifted, preparing to carry Mia up to bed. "Let me," Hannah whispered. "Please. I know I don't have the right, but—" Ryan hesitated, every protective instinct screaming at him to say no. But something in Hannah's face, the desperate hope, the aching need to have this one small moment, made him nod. Hannah lifted Mia with the practiced ease of muscle memory, cradling their daughter against her chest. Mia stirred slightly but didn't wake, her arms automatically circling Hannah's neck. Ryan watched them walk up the stairs together, his heart in his throat. He followed at a distance, standing in Mia's doorway as Hannah gently laid her in bed and pulled up the covers. She stood there for a long moment, just looking at their sleeping daughter, tears streaming silently down her face. "She's perfect," Hannah whispered. "Ryan, she's absolutely perfect. You've done such a good job." "We got lucky," Ryan said quietly. "She's always been amazing." Hannah reached out and gently touched Mia's cheek, the gesture so tender it hurt to watch. Then she straightened and walked toward the door, where Ryan stepped back to let her pass. Downstairs they stood awkwardly in the living room, the evening winding down but neither quite ready for it to end. "I should go," Hannah finally said. "I don't want to overstay." "Do you want coffee?" Ryan heard himself ask. "Or we could finish the wine." Hannah looked surprised. "Are you sure?" "No, yes, maybe." "Yeah," Ryan said. "We should talk. Actually talk." They settled at opposite ends of the couch, still maintaining distance, with fresh glasses of wine. The Christmas tree lights cast everything in a soft glow, making the moment feel almost dreamlike. "She's wonderful, Ryan," Hannah said again. "The way she laughs, the way she looks at you with such trust. You've given her an incredible life." "I did what I had to do," Ryan said, and couldn't keep a slight edge from his voice. "Someone had to." Hannah flinched. "I deserve that." "I'm sorry," Ryan said immediately, rubbing his face. "That wasn't fair." "It was completely fair," Hannah countered. "Ryan, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to understand. But I need you to know that leaving was the hardest thing I've ever done. And every day since has been about trying to become someone worthy of coming back." "Then why didn't you?" The question burst out of Ryan before he could stop it. "Why didn't you come back sooner? If you were getting help, if you were getting better, why wait 3 years? Hannah was quiet for a long moment, staring into her wine. "Fear," she finally admitted. "Pure, paralyzing fear that you'd tell me no, that Mia wouldn't remember me, that I'd lost my chance and there was no way back. Every time I thought about reaching out, I convinced myself it was too late, that I'd done too much damage, that you'd both moved on. We did move on," Ryan said quietly. "We had to. But that doesn't mean—" He stopped, unsure how to finish the sentence. "Doesn't mean what?" Hannah prompted gently. "I don't know," Ryan admitted. "I don't know what it means. All I know is that Mia was so happy tonight, and I haven't seen her that happy in a long time. And that has to mean something, right?" "It means she has a good heart," Hannah said, "like her father." The compliment made Ryan uncomfortable. He didn't want to be seen as good, as forgiving. He wanted to hold on to his anger because anger was safe. Anger kept him protected. But sitting here, watching Hannah struggle with her own emotions, seeing the genuine remorse in every line of her face, it was harder to maintain that anger than he'd expected. "I'm not ready to forgive you," Ryan said, needing to make that clear. "I don't know if I ever will be. What you did, leaving without explanation, without even trying to get help first, it nearly destroyed me. There were days I didn't think I could do it, days when Mia would cry for you and I had no idea how to explain where you'd gone or why you'd left." "I know," Hannah whispered. "God, Ryan, I know. And I would take it all back if I could. I would do everything differently." "But you can't," Ryan said simply. "We can't go back. We can only figure out what happens now." "What do you want to happen?" Hannah asked, her voice tentative. Ryan thought about it, really thought about it. "I want Mia to have a relationship with her mother," he finally said. "I want her to know that you love her, that you didn't leave because of anything she did. Beyond that?" He shook his head. "I don't know. I can't think that far ahead." "That's fair," Hannah said. "That's more than fair. Whatever you're willing to give, I'll take. Just thank you for tonight, for giving me this chance." They talked for another hour, carefully navigating around the biggest wounds while slowly excavating the smaller truths. Hannah told him about therapy, about the medication that finally helped clear the fog that had consumed her after Mia's birth. Ryan told her about learning to be a single parent, about the small victories and the hard days. It wasn't comfortable exactly, but it felt necessary, like lancing a wound that had been festering for too long. When Hannah finally left, standing on the porch as snow began to fall again, she turned back one more time. "Can I see her again? Maybe after the holidays, when things are less hectic?" Ryan nodded slowly. "We'll figure something out, for Mia's sake." "For Mia's sake," Hannah agreed. But as Ryan watched her drive away, taillights disappearing into the snowy night, he wondered if they were both lying, if this was really just about their daughter, or if something else was stirring beneath the surface, something that felt dangerous and hopeful in equal measure. Ryan stood at the front window long after Hannah's car disappeared, watching snowflakes drift through the glow of the streetlights. The house felt different now, charged with something he couldn't name, as if Hannah's presence had disturbed the careful equilibrium he'd spent 3 years establishing. He could still smell her perfume faintly in the living room, something floral and unfamiliar that wasn't the scent he remembered from their marriage. Everything about her was familiar and foreign at once, and that dissonance left him feeling unmoored. He cleaned up the kitchen in silence, washing wine glasses and putting away leftovers, his hands moving through familiar motions while his mind spun in circles. The evening had gone better than he'd expected. No dramatic confrontations, no tears beyond Hannah's quiet moment in Mia's room, no reopening of wounds that couldn't be stitched back together in one night. But better than expected didn't mean good, and it certainly didn't mean resolved. His phone buzzed as he was loading the dishwasher. Sarah's name flashed on the screen with a message that was just a string of question marks. Ryan smiled despite himself and called her back. "Well?" Sarah demanded before he could even say hello. "Don't leave me in suspense. Did she show up? Did you survive? Is Mia okay? Are you okay?" "She showed up," Ryan confirmed, settling onto the couch with a tired sigh. "And we survived. It was complicated." "Complicated how? Good. Complicated or disaster complicated?" Ryan thought about it. "Somewhere in between." Mia was thrilled. Hannah was emotional but appropriate. We talked, really talked, for the first time in 3 years. "And?" Sarah pressed when he paused. "And I don't know what to think," Ryan admitted. She explained about the postpartum depression, about being in therapy, about being too afraid to reach out sooner. "Part of me understands it. Part of me is still furious." "You're allowed to be both," Sarah said gently. "You're allowed to have complicated feelings about a complicated situation. Just be careful, okay? I don't want to see you get hurt again." "I'm not planning on getting hurt again," Ryan said. But even as the words left his mouth, he wondered if that was a promise he could keep. They talked for a few more minutes before saying goodnight. Ryan sat in the darkened living room afterward, the only light coming from the Christmas tree. Tomorrow was just another day. The day after Christmas, when decorations started to feel tired and the magic began to fade. But something had shifted tonight. Some door had cracked open that he wasn't sure could be closed again. Upstairs, he checked on Mia one more time. She was sprawled across her bed in the boneless way of sleeping children, one arm hanging off the side, her fairy castle nightlight casting shadows on the wall. She looked peaceful, content, utterly untroubled by the complexities swirling through her father's mind. "What am I supposed to do, princess?" Ryan whispered to his sleeping daughter. "How do I give you your mother back without losing myself in the process?" Mia, predictably, didn't answer. The days between Christmas and New Year's passed in a strange blur. Mia talked about Hannah constantly, what Mommy had said, what Mommy had worn. When could they see Mommy again? Ryan fielded the questions with increasing unease, torn between wanting to honor his daughter's excitement and needing to protect them both from potential disappointment. Hannah texted occasionally, nothing invasive, just brief messages asking how Mia was doing or sharing a memory that had resurfaced. Ryan responded carefully, keeping his replies friendly but distant, acutely aware that every interaction was setting some kind of precedent for whatever came next. On the 28th, Hannah sent a photo of her and her mother, both wearing paper crowns from Christmas crackers. Eleanor looked frail but was smiling, and the caption read, "Mom wanted me to tell Mia she says hello. She always asks about her granddaughter." Ryan stared at the photo for a long time. Eleanor had been a good grandmother in the brief time before Hannah left, doting and warm, always ready with cookies and stories. Mia had been too young to remember her, and Ryan had felt guilty about letting that relationship dissolve along with everything else. But what was he supposed to have done? Maintain contact with his ex-wife's family while she'd vanished? He showed the photo to Mia, who studied it seriously. "Is that Grandma Eleanor?" she asked. "It is," Ryan confirmed, surprised Mia even knew the name. "Do you remember her?" Mia shook her head. "But I've seen pictures in the album you keep in your closet." Ryan's chest tightened. He'd forgotten about that album. Photos from their wedding, from Mia's early years, from when they'd been a complete family. He'd shoved it in the back of his closet 2 years ago, unable to throw it away but unwilling to look at it. "She looks nice," Mia said, handing back the phone. "Is she very sick?" "Yes, sweetheart, very sick." Mia processed this with the gravity of a child who'd learned about death, but hadn't yet experienced it personally. "That's sad," she finally said. "Mommy must be really sad, too." The simple empathy in her voice made Ryan's decision for him. He typed back, "Mia says hello to Grandma Eleanor. She'd love to meet her if Eleanor feels up for visitors. The response came quickly. Really? Are you sure? I don't want to push. Ryan hesitated, then wrote, I'm sure. Let us know when would be good. That was how, 3 days later, Ryan found himself driving to Eleanor's house with Mia chattering nervously in the back seat. The house was in the older part of town, a craftsman-style home that Ryan had visited countless times during his marriage. It looked smaller than he remembered, shabbier, as if it had aged rapidly in the years since he'd last been there. Hannah met them at the door, her expression a mixture of gratitude and anxiety. Thank you for this, she said quietly. Mom has been talking about it non-stop since I told her you were coming. How is she today? Ryan asked, stepping into the familiar foyer with its worn hardwood floors and faded wallpaper. Good, Hannah said. She's having a good day, which is a gift. The nurse just left and she's awake and alert. She looked down at Mia, her expression softening. She's so excited to see you, sweetheart. Mia pressed closer to Ryan's leg, suddenly shy. What if she doesn't like me? Hannah crouched down to Mia's level. She already loves you, she said gently. She's loved you since before you were born. She just hasn't gotten to see you in a long time. The living room had been converted into a bedroom, with a hospital bed positioned near the window so Eleanor could see outside. She was propped up on pillows, an oxygen tube in her nose, her once robust frame diminished to something small and fragile. But her eyes, still bright and sharp, lit up when she saw them enter. Ryan, Eleanor said, her voice weak but warm. Oh my goodness, you're here. And this can't be little Mia. Look how big you've gotten. Mia hung back, uncertain, but Eleanor's genuine delight was hard to resist. Slowly, she moved closer to the bed, studying her grandmother with open curiosity. I'm 5 now, Mia announced, and I can read some words and I'm learning to do cartwheels. 5 years old, Eleanor marveled. That's very big indeed. Come here, darling. Let me see you properly. Ryan watched as his daughter approached the bed, saw Hannah hovering anxiously in the doorway. This was surreal. Standing in Eleanor's living room as if no time had passed, as if they were still family instead of people connected only by the fragile thread of a child. Eleanor and Mia talked about simple things, Mia's school, her favorite toys, what she wanted to be when she grew up. Eleanor listened with the rapt attention of someone trying to absorb every detail to make up for years of absence in a single afternoon. Her hand, thin and marked with age spots, rested on Mia's arm, a gentle touch that said more than words could. Your mommy was just your age when she learned to ride a bike, Eleanor said at one point. She was so determined, fell off 20 times but kept getting back on. Mia's eyes widened. Really? Mommy, you fell off 20 times? Hannah, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner, smiled. At least 20 times, maybe more. I was very stubborn. Like Daddy says I am, Mia said proudly, and everyone laughed. Ryan found himself relaxing incrementally, the strangeness of the situation fading into something almost comfortable. Eleanor asked him about his teaching, about his life, and he answered honestly, talking about the challenges and rewards of single parenthood, about how Mia had become his entire world. You've done a remarkable job, Eleanor said, her eyes serious. I always knew you would. You were always so good with her, even when she was tiny. The compliment sat uncomfortably with Ryan. He didn't want Eleanor's approval, didn't want to fall back into the easy warmth of this family that had once been his, but he couldn't be rude to a dying woman who'd only ever been kind to him. After an hour, Eleanor began to tire, her responses getting slower, her eyes drooping. Hannah noticed immediately and stood up. Mom should rest now, she said gently. Mia looked disappointed but nodded. She leaned close to Eleanor and said, I'll come back and visit again, okay? Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. I would love that, sweetheart. Thank you for coming to see your old grandma. You're not that old, Mia said loyally, and Eleanor laughed even as she cried. Hannah walked them to the door, and this time Ryan was the one who lingered. Thank you, Hannah said again. You have no idea what this meant to her, to both of us. Mia enjoyed it, Ryan said, which was true, but felt inadequate. Can I? Hannah hesitated. Would it be okay if I called sometimes, to talk to Mia? I know I don't have the right to ask, but you can call, Ryan heard himself say. Not every day? But sometimes, we'll figure out a schedule. The relief on Hannah's face was almost painful to witness. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you. In the car, Mia was quiet for the first few minutes before asking, "Is Grandma Eleanor going to die soon?" The question was direct in the way children's questions often were, cutting through pretense to the heart of things. Ryan gripped the steering wheel tighter. Probably yes. That's what happens when people get very sick like she is. That's sad, Mia said, echoing her earlier sentiment. Mommy will be really sad. Yes, she will, Ryan agreed. Can we help her when she's sad? Ryan glanced in the rearview mirror at his daughter, seeing the concern on her small face. When had she become so empathetic, so attuned to others' pain? What do you think we should do? He asked. Mia thought about it seriously. We could visit more, and maybe bring her food. You always say food helps when people are sad. A laugh escaped Ryan despite everything. I do say that, don't I? So can we help Mommy when Grandma Eleanor dies? The when instead of if struck Ryan as both realistic and heartbreaking. Yes, he said quietly. We can help her. The schedule they established was loose but consistent. Hannah called twice a week to talk to Mia, usually for 20 or 30 minutes. The conversations were carefully monitored at first, with Ryan staying close enough to intervene if necessary. But Hannah proved herself over and over, asking appropriate questions, sharing age-appropriate stories, never making promises she couldn't keep. They visited Eleanor 2 more times before she took a sudden turn for the worse. Hannah's text came at 3 in the morning. Mom's in the hospital. They don't think it will be much longer. I know it's the middle of the night, but I wanted you to know. Ryan stared at the message in the darkness of his bedroom, listening to the house's quiet creaks and sighs. He should go back to sleep. This wasn't his problem, wasn't his family anymore. But he thought about Hannah sitting alone in a hospital waiting room, about Eleanor who'd welcomed him with open arms when he'd married her daughter, about Mia's insistence that they should help when Mommy was sad. He texted back, "Do you need anything?" The response took several minutes. Just knowing someone cares, that's enough. But it wasn't enough, Ryan realized. He got up, checked on Mia, still sleeping soundly, and called Sarah. Someone better be dead or dying, Sarah answered groggily. Dying, Ryan confirmed. Hannah's mom, she's in the hospital. I'm thinking about going there. There was a long pause. Are you asking my permission or my opinion? I don't know, both? Sarah sighed, and Ryan could picture her sitting up in bed, running her hands through her hair the way she did when thinking. You're going to go whether I think it's a good idea or not, aren't you? Probably, Ryan admitted. Then go. But Ryan, remember that supporting someone through grief doesn't mean you have to let them back into your life permanently. You can be kind without being stupid about it. I know, Ryan said, though he wasn't sure he did. He called his neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who'd watched Mia before, and insisted she didn't mind being woken up for an emergency. Within 30 minutes, Mia was still asleep in Mrs. Chen's guest room, and Ryan was driving through empty pre-dawn streets toward the hospital. He found Hannah in the ICU waiting room, alone and small-looking in a plastic chair. Her hair was uncombed, her face bare of makeup, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. When she saw him, her expression went through rapid succession of emotions, shock, confusion, and then something that looked like desperate gratitude. Ryan, she whispered, what are you doing here? I don't know, he said honestly, settling into the chair beside her. But you shouldn't be alone. Hannah's composure crumbled. She turned her face away, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Without thinking, Ryan put his arm around her, and she collapsed against him the way she used to when they were married, when comfort between them had been natural and easy instead of complicated and fraught. She's asking for me, but she's not really there anymore, Hannah said between sobs. She keeps thinking I'm a child. She keeps asking for my father, and he's been dead for 10 years. Ryan held her and let her cry, offering no platitudes because there were none that would help. They sat like that for nearly an hour before a nurse came to tell them Eleanor had stabilized slightly, that Hannah could go in if she wanted. Will you come with me? Hannah asked, and the vulnerability in her voice made it impossible to say no. Eleanor's room was dim and filled with the steady beep of machines. She looked impossibly small in the hospital bed. Her breathing labored despite the oxygen. But when Hannah took her hand, Eleanor's eyes opened. "Hannah," she whispered. "My girl." "I'm here, Mom," Hannah said, her voice breaking. "I'm right here." Eleanor's gaze drifted to Ryan, and for a moment something like recognition flickered. "You take care of my girls," she said, the words slurred but clear enough. "Both my girls." Ryan swallowed hard. "I will," he said, not sure if he was lying or making a promise he didn't fully understand yet. Eleanor smiled, satisfied, and her eyes drifted closed again. They stayed for another 2 hours before the doctor suggested Hannah go home and rest. "She could hold on for days," the doctor said gently. "You need to take care of yourself, too." Ryan drove Hannah back to Eleanor's house, neither of them speaking much. The sun was rising by then, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that felt inappropriately beautiful given the circumstances. "Thank you," Hannah said as they pulled into the driveway. "For coming. For being there. You didn't have to." "I know," Ryan said. Hannah turned to look at him, really look at him, and Ryan saw the question in her eyes. A question about what this meant, about whether this changed anything between them. But he didn't have an answer, so he just nodded and watched her go inside. He picked up Mia from Mrs. Chen's house, endured his daughter's 20 questions about where he'd been, and made it through the day on coffee and determination. That evening, he told Mia that Grandma Eleanor was very sick and might not be with them much longer. "Can we make her a card?" Mia asked, "to tell her we're thinking about her?" So they made a card, Mia coloring rainbows and flowers, while Ryan wrote a message that tried to convey things he didn't quite know how to say. They mailed it that afternoon, and Ryan hoped Eleanor would be lucid enough to see it. She died 2 days later, in the early morning hours, with Hannah holding her hand. The text came at 6 a.m. "She's gone. Peaceful. Thank you for everything." Ryan stared at the message, feeling the weight of it settle in his chest. He'd known it was coming, but knowing didn't make it easier. He thought about Eleanor, her kindness, her warmth, the way she'd welcomed him into her family, and never made him feel like he had to earn his place. He broke the news to Mia over breakfast, and she cried in the uncomplicated way of children who were sad but didn't fully comprehend the permanence of death. "Can we see Mommy?" she asked through her tears. "She must be really, really sad." "Not today," Ryan said gently. "Mommy needs time to take care of things, but we'll see her soon." The funeral was scheduled for the following weekend. Ryan debated whether to attend. He wasn't family anymore, had no official right to be there, but Mia wanted to go, wanted to say goodbye to the grandmother she'd barely known, and Ryan couldn't send her without him. So on a gray Saturday morning, they dressed in dark clothes and drove to the church where Ryan and Hannah had been married 7 years earlier. The building looked the same. White clapboard siding, tall steeple, stained glass windows that caught the weak winter light. Ryan's hands were sweating on the steering wheel as they pulled into the parking lot. Inside, the church was half full of people Ryan mostly didn't recognize. Eleanor's friends, her colleagues from the library where she'd worked for 30 years, neighbors and community members whose lives she'd touched. Hannah stood near the front, accepting condolences with the hollow-eyed exhaustion of someone running on empty. When she saw Ryan and Mia, something in her expression shifted, became less blank, more present. She crossed to them immediately, crouching down to hug Mia with desperate intensity. "You came," Hannah whispered, looking up at Ryan with wet eyes. "You actually came." "Of course we came," Ryan said, the words coming out gruffer than he intended. The service was simple and moving, full of stories about Eleanor's kindness and generosity. Hannah gave a eulogy that had half the congregation in tears, talking about her mother's strength, her love, her unwavering belief that people deserved second chances. "She never gave up on anyone," Hannah said, her voice wavering but strong. "Even when they gave up on themselves. She taught me that love means holding on even when it's hard, and forgiving even when it seems impossible." Ryan wondered if those words were meant for him, or if he was reading too much into a grieving daughter's tribute to her mother. At the reception afterward, held in the church basement with sandwiches and coffee, Ryan found himself cornered by Hannah's Aunt Margaret, a formidable woman who had never particularly liked him. "So you're back in the picture," Margaret said, her tone making it clear this wasn't a question. "I'm here for Mia," Ryan said carefully, "and to pay respects to Eleanor." Margaret studied him with sharp eyes. "Hannah's been through hell, you know. This isn't the first loss she's dealt with." The comment felt loaded with meaning Ryan didn't fully understand. "I know about the postpartum depression," he said. "Do you?" Margaret challenged. "Do you know about the miscarriage before that? The one that sent her spiraling even before Mia was born? Do you know about the family history of depression that made her terrified she'd inherited her own mother's struggles?" Ryan felt like the ground had shifted beneath him. "What miscarriage?" Margaret's expression softened slightly, seeing his genuine confusion. "Early on, 6 weeks. She didn't tell you?" "No," Ryan said, his mind reeling. "She never told me." "Well," Margaret said, her tone gentler now, "that's between you two. But I'm telling you now because if you're going to be in her life again, or in Mia's life with her, you need to understand that Hannah's been fighting battles you don't know about. And maybe if you'd known about them then, things would have been different." She walked away, leaving Ryan standing alone with a cup of bad coffee and a head full of questions. A miscarriage? Before Mia? How had he not known? Had he been that oblivious, that wrapped up in his own world? He found Hannah an hour later, standing alone in the church parking lot, staring at nothing. She looked wrung out, empty, like someone who'd given everything they had and had nothing left. "Why didn't you tell me?" Ryan asked without preamble. Hannah didn't pretend not to know what he meant. "About the miscarriage?" "Yes." She was quiet for a long moment. "Because I blame myself," she finally said. "Because I thought if I'd been stronger, healthier, more careful, it wouldn't have happened. And I was afraid you'd blame me too." "I wouldn't have," Ryan said, and meant it completely. "I know that now," Hannah said. "But back then I wasn't thinking clearly. The miscarriage happened, and I fell apart, and then I got pregnant with Mia so quickly afterward that I didn't have time to process any of it. And the whole time I was terrified. Terrified I'd lose her too. Terrified I wasn't strong enough to be a mother. Terrified of everything." "You should have told me," Ryan said, but without the anger that would have been there weeks ago. Now it was just sadness, grief for the communication that had failed them both. "I should have told you a lot of things," Hannah agreed. "But I was drowning, Ryan. And when you're drowning, you can't always see the hand reaching out to save you." They stood in silence, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. Finally, Ryan spoke. "Mia wants you to come to dinner again, tomorrow. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti. But she asked, and I think you should come." Hannah's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "No," Ryan admitted, "but I'm asking anyway." A ghost of a smile touched Hannah's lips, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her all day. "Then yes, I'd love to." The next evening, Hannah came to dinner, and this time the atmosphere was different. Less tense, more comfortable, as if they'd all agreed to stop fighting against something inevitable. Mia showed Hannah her room, her toys, her collection of rocks from the playground. Hannah listened and engaged and asked questions, slipping into the role of mother with an ease that suggested it had never really left her. After Mia went to bed, Ryan and Hannah sat in the living room with tea, talking about nothing and everything. They laughed about Mia's stubborn streak, compared notes on her preferences and quirks, marveled at how much she'd grown. "I've missed so much," Hannah said quietly, "and I know I can never get that back." "No," Ryan agreed, "you can't, but maybe you can be part of what comes next." Hannah looked at him, hope and fear warring in her expression. "What does that mean?" "I don't know yet," Ryan said honestly, "but I think we need to figure it out, for Mia's sake." "Just for Mia's sake?" Hannah asked softly. Ryan met her eyes, saw the question there, and felt something shift in his chest, something dangerous and hopeful that he'd thought was dead and buried. "I don't know," he whispered. "Maybe not just for Mia." The admission hung in the air between them, fragile and significant. Hannah reached across the space separating them on the couch and took his hand. The touch was gentle, tentative, asking permission rather than demanding acceptance. Ryan didn't pull away. They sat like that for a long time, hands joined, neither speaking, both trying to figure out if the bridge between who they'd been and who they might become was strong enough to cross. Outside, snow began to fall again, covering the world in white, making everything look new. The weeks that followed Eleanor's funeral unfolded with a strange kind of rhythm, like learning to dance to music that kept changing tempo. Hannah became a regular presence in their lives. Not constant, not overwhelming, but there. She came for dinner every Wednesday, a schedule they'd agreed upon after lengthy discussion. She called Mia on Saturday mornings, their conversations full of giggles and stories that Ryan could hear from the kitchen where he pretended not to be listening. And slowly, incrementally, the sharp edges of their shared past began to soften into something less cutting. Ryan found himself thinking about Hannah at odd moments, while grading papers at school, while making breakfast, while lying awake at night staring at the ceiling. Not the Hannah who'd left, though that ghost still haunted the corners of his memory. This was a different Hannah, or maybe the same one stripped of the illness that had consumed her. He caught glimpses of the woman he'd fallen in love with 8 years ago, back when they'd been young and stupid and certain that love conquered everything. Turned out love didn't conquer everything, but maybe Ryan was starting to think it could survive more than he'd given it credit for. Sarah visited in mid-January, sweeping into the house with her characteristic energy and immediately demanding a full accounting of everything that had happened since Christmas. Ryan tried to downplay it, but Mia, who had inherited her aunt's tendency toward dramatic storytelling, provided enthusiastic commentary about every visit with Mommy, every phone call, every moment of connection. "So she's just back in your life now," Sarah said later that evening, after Mia had gone to bed. They sat at the kitchen table with wine, a replay of countless conversations they'd had over the years. "Just like that." "Not just like that," Ryan corrected. "It's complicated." "Well, everything with you two is complicated," Sarah observed. "But I need to ask, and I need you to be honest with me. Are you falling for her again?" The question landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through Ryan's carefully maintained composure. "I don't know," he said, which was both true and a cop-out. "Maybe, probably. I'm trying not to." "Why?" Sarah asked, and the question was genuine, not accusatory. "Why are you trying not to?" Ryan stared into his wine glass, watching the liquid catch the light. "Because I remember what it felt like when she left. I remember lying on the bathroom floor at 2 a.m. because Mia was crying, and I didn't know how to help her, and thinking that I couldn't do it, that I wasn't strong enough. And I survived that, Sarah. I came out the other side, but I don't know if I could survive it again." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "That's a fair fear," she said gently. "But Ryan, you're not the same person you were 3 years ago. Neither is she. Maybe the question isn't whether you could survive her leaving again. Maybe it's whether you're brave enough to let her stay." The words stayed with Ryan long after Sarah left, echoing through his thoughts like a song he couldn't shake. Was he brave enough? He'd always thought of himself as practical, cautious, someone who learned from mistakes rather than repeating them. But there was Mia to consider. Mia, who blossomed a little more each time she saw her mother, who'd started drawing pictures of 3 people instead of 2, who talked about when Mommy comes with the casual certainty of a child who'd decided how the world should work. And there was Hannah herself, trying so hard, showing up consistently, never pushing for more than Ryan was willing to give. She'd started therapy again after Eleanor's death, and she talked about it openly now, treating her mental health like something to be managed rather than hidden. She'd gotten a part-time job at the library where her mother had worked, organizing estate sales to settle Eleanor's affairs, building a life that was separate from Ryan and Mia, but orbited around them. February brought a cold snap that froze everything solid and kept people indoors. Ryan's school district called a snow day after an ice storm made the roads treacherous, and he found himself home with Mia on a Wednesday, which meant Hannah was supposed to come for dinner, though he'd texted her that morning suggesting they reschedule given the weather. Her response had been immediate. "I have 4-wheel drive and determination, unless you're actually canceling." Ryan had stared at that message for a long time before typing back, "Not canceling, just worried about the roads." "Worried about me," Hannah had written, and even through text he could hear the wonder in those words, as if the idea that he might still care about her safety was something precious and fragile. She arrived at 5:30, stamping snow off her boots and unwinding a scarf from around her neck. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, her hair escaping from under a knit hat, and she looked more alive than Ryan had seen her in years, including the years of their marriage. "The roads are terrible," she announced, accepting the hot chocolate Mia thrust into her hands. "I passed 3 accidents on the way over, but I made it." "You didn't have to risk it," Ryan said, trying to ignore the way his heart had jumped when he'd heard her car pull into the driveway. "We could have done next week." "But I didn't want to wait until next week," Hannah said simply, meeting his eyes over Mia's head. "I look forward to Wednesdays." The admission sat between them, heavy with implications. Mia, oblivious to the undercurrents, dragged Hannah toward the living room to show her the blanket fort she'd constructed, an elaborate structure involving every pillow in the house and most of the kitchen chairs. Dinner was pizza because Ryan had planned to cook, but the snow day had thrown off his schedule. They ate in the blanket fort at Mia's insistence, crowded together in a space meant for a child, their knees bumping and elbows colliding. It should have been awkward. Instead, it felt almost magical. The 3 of them cocooned from the storm outside, fairy lights from Mia's room strung through the fort's ceiling, creating a warm glow that made everything feel safe and possible. After dinner, Mia insisted on a movie, and somehow Ryan found himself on the couch with Hannah beside him, Mia sprawled across both their laps like a bridge connecting them. The movie was animated and cheerful, something about talking animals on an adventure, but Ryan couldn't have summarized the plot if his life depended on it. His attention kept drifting to Hannah's hand, resting on the couch cushion between them, so close to his own that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Halfway through the movie, Mia fell asleep, her breathing evening out into the soft rhythm of childhood slumber. Ryan looked down at his daughter, then up at Hannah, who was watching Mia with an expression of such tender love that Ryan felt his chest constrict. "She's perfect," Hannah whispered. "Ryan, I look at her, and I can't believe I stayed away as long as I did. I can't believe I let my illness convince me that she was better off without me." "You were sick," Ryan said quietly, repeating the words he'd told himself countless times since Christmas. "Sick people don't make rational decisions." "That's generous of you to say." "It's not generous, it's true." Hannah turned to look at him fully, and the intensity in her gaze made Ryan's breath catch. "You've changed," she said softly. "You're more patient than you used to be, more understanding. Life has been good to you, even though I made it hard." "Life hasn't been good to me," Ryan corrected. "Mia has been good to me. She forced me to become someone worthy of her." "You were always worthy," Hannah said, and now her hand moved, covering his where it rested on the couch. The touch sent electricity through Ryan's nerves, familiar and foreign at once. "I was the one who wasn't worthy. But I'm trying to be. I want to be." Ryan knew he should pull his hand away, should maintain the boundaries they'd carefully established. But he didn't. Instead, he turned his palm up, lacing his fingers through Hannah's, feeling the way they fit together like pieces of a puzzle he'd thought was permanently broken. "Hannah," he said, her name a question and a warning and a plea all at once. "I know," she whispered. "I know we can't rush this. I know I have to earn your trust back. But Ryan, I need you to know, what I feel for you, it never went away. Even at my sickest, even when I couldn't see past the darkness, I loved you. I just didn't know how to love you and myself at the same time." The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Ryan's first instinct was to protect himself, to retreat behind the walls that had kept him safe. But he thought about Sarah's words, about being brave enough to let Hannah stay. "I'm terrified," Ryan admitted, his voice barely audible over the movie still playing on the TV. "I'm terrified of getting hurt again, of Mia getting hurt, of building something that falls apart the moment things get hard." "I'm terrified too," Hannah said. "But maybe we can be terrified together?" Before Ryan could respond, Mia stirred in her sleep, mumbling something incomprehensible. The moment broke, and they both looked down at their daughter, the physical reminder of what was at stake. "I should get her to bed," Ryan said, reluctantly pulling his hand from Hannah's. "Let me help," Hannah offered, and together they carried Mia upstairs, Ryan supporting her weight, Hannah guiding them around furniture in the darkened house. They moved with the synchronicity of people who'd done this before, who'd once been partners in the small daily rituals of raising a child. After Mia was tucked in, they stood in the hallway outside her room, suddenly awkward now that the moment had passed. The house felt very quiet around them, the storm outside muffled by walls and windows. "I should go," Hannah said, but she didn't move toward the stairs. "The roads are still bad," Ryan heard himself say. "You could stay, on the couch," he added quickly, "just until the morning, when they've had a chance to salt the roads." Hannah's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" No, Ryan thought, until, "Yes," he said aloud. He found blankets and a pillow, made up the couch while Hannah watched from the doorway. The domesticity of it felt loaded with meaning. This woman who'd once shared his bed now relegated to the couch, but invited to stay nonetheless. It was progress, Ryan supposed, even if he couldn't quite define toward what. "Thank you," Hannah said as Ryan handed her the pillow. "For everything. For tonight, for the last few weeks, for giving me a chance I don't deserve." "Stop saying you don't deserve things," Ryan said, more sharply than he intended. "Maybe you made mistakes. Maybe you hurt us. But you're trying now, and that has to count for something." Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "You're a good man, Ryan Walker." "I'm a work in progress," Ryan corrected, "just like everyone else." He left her there and went upstairs to his own room, but sleep felt impossible. He lay in the darkness, listening to the house settle around him, acutely aware that Hannah was just one floor below. Part of him wanted to go back downstairs, to pick up the conversation where they'd left it, to explore the feelings they danced around all evening. But another part, the scared, scarred part, knew that rushing would ruin everything. So he stayed in bed and tried not to think about the way Hannah's hand had felt in his, or the hope in her eyes when she'd talked about being terrified together. Morning came gray and cold, the world outside coated in ice that turned everything into a crystal sculpture. Ryan came downstairs to find Hannah already awake, folding the blanket she'd used, trying to erase evidence of her presence, as if afraid she'd overstepped. "Coffee?" Ryan offered, moving toward the kitchen. "Please," Hannah said gratefully. They drank coffee in comfortable silence, standing at the kitchen counter and watching the sunrise paint the frozen landscape in shades of pink and gold. Mia was still sleeping. Snow days meant she'd lounge in bed until at least 8, and the quiet between Ryan and Hannah felt companionable rather than awkward. "Can I ask you something?" Hannah said eventually, setting down her mug. "And you can tell me if I'm overstepping." "Okay," Ryan said cautiously. "Did you date anyone after I left? I'd understand if you did. I need to know what I'm walking back into." The question was fair, Ryan supposed, even if it made him uncomfortable. "I went on a few dates," he admitted. "Nothing serious. Nothing that went past a third date. I told myself it was because of Mia, because I didn't want to introduce her to people who might not stick around. But honestly, I think I was still too angry to let anyone in." Hannah nodded slowly. "And now? Are you still too angry?" Ryan thought about it, really considered the question. The rage that had sustained him through the first year, that had kept him moving when everything felt impossible. Where had it gone? Somewhere along the way, between Christmas and now, it had transformed into something softer. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe understanding. "I'm getting less angry every day," he said quietly, "though I reserve the right to be angry again if I need to be." A smile touched Hannah's lips. "That's fair." They stood there for another moment, the air between them charged with possibility. Ryan wondered what would happen if he closed the distance, if he kissed her the way he suddenly wanted to. But before he could act on the impulse, or talk himself out of it, Mia's voice drifted down from upstairs. "Daddy, is Mommy still here?" The spell broke. Hannah laughed softly, shaking her head. "I should probably go anyway. The road should be better now." But as Ryan walked her to the door, helped her with her coat, watched her scrape ice off her windshield, he felt something settle in his chest, a decision he hadn't quite made but was approaching nonetheless. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe it was time to be brave. The next Wednesday, Hannah brought flowers, not for Ryan, but for Mia, who was thrilled by the bouquet of daisies and insisted on putting them in a vase on the dinner table. The Wednesday after that, she brought ingredients for cookies, and they baked together, flour ending up everywhere despite their best efforts. Small gestures that added up to something larger, something that felt almost like family. In mid-February, Mia's school announced a father-daughter dance, and Ryan felt the familiar pang of being a single parent. The knowledge that Mia would notice other kids with two parents, would feel the absence even if she didn't say it aloud. But when he mentioned it casually to Hannah during one of their Wednesday dinners, she surprised him. "What if I took her dress shopping?" Hannah offered tentatively. "Girls need opinions on dresses, and I know I haven't been around much, but if you think it would be okay—" "Yes," Ryan interrupted. "Yes, that would be good. She'd love that." Mia's excitement when they told her was almost overwhelming. She talked about nothing else for days, planning the shopping trip with the seriousness of a military operation. When the day came, Ryan dropped her off at the mall to meet Hannah, feeling strangely nervous as he watched his daughter run toward her mother. They were gone for 3 hours, and when Hannah brought Mia home, both of them were laughing, laden with shopping bags and stories. Mia had found the perfect dress, purple with sparkles, and Hannah had apparently bought her matching shoes and a hair clip shaped like a butterfly. "You didn't have to do all that," Ryan said as Mia ran upstairs to try everything on again. "I wanted to," Hannah said simply. "Ryan, I've missed 5 years of shopping trips and hair appointments and all the little moments that make up a childhood. Let me have this one, even if it's all I ever get." The phrase "all I ever get" struck Ryan as unnecessarily pessimistic, but before he could say so, Mia was calling them both upstairs to see the full ensemble. She twirled in front of the mirror, the dress flaring around her legs, her face glowing with happiness. "I'm going to be the prettiest one at the dance," she declared with absolute confidence. "You absolutely are," Hannah agreed, meeting Ryan's eyes over their daughter's head with a smile that made his heart skip. The night of the dance, Ryan put on his one decent suit and helped Mia with her hair, following the braiding tutorial that Hannah had texted him with step-by-step photos. They arrived at the school gymnasium, decorated with hearts and streamers, already full of fathers and daughters in fancy clothes. Mia was immediately swept up in the excitement, dragging Ryan onto the dance floor for every song. He twirled her and let her stand on his feet so they could waltz, and felt his heart swell with love for this small person who'd become his entire world. During a slow song, Mia looked up at him with serious eyes. "Daddy? Do you think Mommy wishes she was here?" The question caught Ryan off guard. "I think she's happy you had a good time shopping with her. But wouldn't it be nice if she could come to things like this? With us?" Ryan pulled Mia closer, buying time to formulate an answer. "Maybe someday," he said carefully, "but these things take time." "How much time?" Mia pressed, with the impatience of a child who wanted everything resolved immediately. "I don't know, Princess. We're still figuring it out." But later that night, after he'd tucked Mia into bed and was cleaning up the kitchen, Ryan found himself pulling out his phone and typing a message to Hannah. "Mia had a great time tonight. Thank you for making the shopping trip special. She asked if you'd want to come to things like this in the future." The response came quickly. "What did you tell her?" Ryan stared at the screen, his thumbs hovering over the keys. Finally, he typed, "I told her maybe someday. But Hannah, I think I meant it." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "Can we talk? Not tonight, but soon? Really talk about what this is and what it could be?" Ryan's heart hammered in his chest. This was it. The moment where they'd have to define things, to decide if they were rebuilding something or just maintaining a cordial co-parenting relationship. The safe choice would be to keep things as they were, undefined and non-threatening. But safe hadn't gotten him much except lonely nights, and a daughter who kept asking when Mommy could come to things. "Yes," he typed back. "Saturday? After Mia's at her friend's birthday party?" "Saturday," Hannah confirmed. The days until Saturday crawled by with excruciating slowness. Ryan second-guessed himself constantly. Maybe this was too fast. Maybe he was setting himself up for heartbreak. Maybe he should protect himself and Mia rather than risk everything again. But every time he saw Hannah with Mia, every time he caught himself smiling at something she'd said, every time he reached for his phone to text her something funny or interesting, he knew the decision was already made. He'd already let her back in. The question was whether he'd admit it out loud. Saturday afternoon found Ryan nervous in a way he hadn't been since their first date 8 years ago. He'd dropped Mia at her friend's house, confirmed pickup time, and driven home with sweaty palms and a racing heart. Hannah arrived at 2, looking equally nervous, her hands twisting together as she stood on the porch. "Hi," she said, the single word carrying the weight of everything unspoken between them. "Hi," Ryan echoed. "Come in." They settled in the living room, sitting on opposite ends of the couch, the same formation they'd maintained for weeks, the physical distance a buffer against emotional intimacy. But this time, the distance felt wrong, like they were actors who'd forgotten they were supposed to move closer during this scene. "So," Hannah started, then laughed nervously. "I don't actually know how to begin this conversation." "Me either," Ryan admitted, "but I think we need to have it anyway." Hannah nodded, took a deep breath, and seemed to gather her courage. "Ryan, these past few months have been the happiest I've been in years. Getting to know Mia again, spending time with you, feeling like maybe I could be part of a family again, it's everything I dreamed about during the years I was gone. But I need to know if it's just about Mia for you, or if there's a possibility that it could be about us too." The directness of the question demanded an equally direct answer. Ryan could hide behind ambiguity, could protect himself with carefully neutral words, or he could be honest. "It stopped being just about Mia weeks ago," Ryan said, watching Hannah's face as he spoke. "Maybe it was never just about Mia, as much as I tried to convince myself otherwise. Hannah, I'm scared. I'm terrified, actually. But I also can't stop thinking about you, about the way you laugh at Mia's jokes, about how you've changed, about whether we could actually make this work." Hannah's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "What would making this work look like to you?" "I don't know," Ryan said honestly. "I know it can't be what it was before. We're different people now. But maybe that's good. Maybe we can build something new, something stronger, something that can survive when things get hard, because things will get hard again." "They will," Hannah agreed. "And I can't promise I won't have bad days or that my depression won't flare up sometimes. But I can promise I'm committed to managing it, to being honest about it, to asking for help when I need it instead of running away." Ryan studied her face, looking for any hint of uncertainty or doubt. He found only fierce determination and tentative hope. "If we do this," he said slowly, "we take it slow. We date like normal people, not like we're picking up where we left off. Mia stays our priority, but we also figure out who we are to each other now, not who we used to be." "I can do slow," Hannah said, and now a smile was breaking through her nervousness. "Ryan, I can do whatever you need. I'm not going anywhere this time." "You can't promise that," Ryan said, but gently. "None of us can promise we'll never leave, but you can promise to try. And maybe that's enough." Hannah slid across the couch, closing the distance between them, and took both of Ryan's hands in hers. "I promise to try," she said solemnly. "Every single day, I promise to try to be worthy of you and Mia. I promise to communicate when things are hard instead of hiding. I promise to fight for this family instead of running from it." Ryan's throat felt tight with emotion. "I promise to try too," he said, "to be patient when I want to be guarded, to trust you when fear tells me not to remember that we're both doing our best, even when our best isn't perfect." They sat there, hands clasped, eyes locked, and Ryan felt the last of his walls crumble. This was it. The leap of faith, the moment of choosing hope over safety. And surprisingly, terrifyingly, wonderfully, it felt right. "Can I kiss you?" Hannah whispered. "I've been wanting to for weeks, but I didn't know if—" Ryan didn't let her finish. He leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers, and it was like coming home and discovering a new country all at once. The kiss was soft, tentative, asking questions and answering them, testing whether this fragile thing between them could bear the weight of their history. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling through tears. "So we're doing this?" Hannah asked. "We're doing this," Ryan confirmed. And just like that, everything changed, and nothing changed. They were still two broken people trying to build something whole from fragments of the past. But now they were trying together, and that made all the difference. The kiss changed everything and nothing all at once. When Ryan pulled back, searching Hannah's face for confirmation that this was real, that they were really doing this, he found her looking at him with an expression so full of wonder and gratitude that it made his chest ache. They sat there in the quiet of the living room, still holding hands, both processing the magnitude of what they'd just decided. "We should probably talk about how we tell Mia," Hannah said eventually, her practical side emerging even through the emotion. "I don't want to confuse her or get her hopes up if we're taking things slow." Ryan nodded, appreciating that Hannah's first thought was their daughter. It was a good sign, he told himself. A sign that she'd learned, that she'd grown, that she understood what mattered most. "We tell her the truth," he said, "that Mommy and Daddy are spending time together, getting to know each other again, but that doesn't mean everything goes back to how it was. We're building something new." "Do you think she'll understand that?" Hannah asked, uncertainty creeping into her voice. "She's smarter than we give her credit for," Ryan said, "and she's been asking about it anyway. I think she'll just be happy that we're trying." They spent the next hour talking through logistics, how often Hannah would come over, whether they'd go on actual dates without Mia, what boundaries they needed to establish to protect all three of them. It felt mature and responsible. Two people who'd learned from past mistakes trying to build something more solid. But underneath the practical planning, Ryan could feel the current of something else. Hope, attraction, the fragile beginning of trust being rebuilt. When Mia came home from the birthday party, hopped up on cake and friendship, she bounded into the living room and stopped short, seeing her parents sitting closer together than usual. Her eyes went wide, darting between them, and Ryan could practically see the gears turning in her head. "Are you guys having a grown-up talk?" she asked suspiciously. "Actually, yes," Ryan said, pulling Mia onto his lap. "And it's a grown-up talk that includes you, so come here." Hannah shifted slightly, making room in their little circle, and Ryan noticed the way her hand trembled slightly before she clasped it in her lap. She was nervous, he realized. Nervous about Mia's reaction, about whether this would all be too much too fast. "So," Ryan began, glancing at Hannah for support, "you know how you've been asking if Mommy could come to more things with us?" Mia nodded enthusiastically, her curls bouncing. "Like all the time." "Well, Mommy and I have been talking, and we've decided that we want to spend more time together, all three of us, but also sometimes just the two of us, like when grown-ups are dating." Mia's eyes went even wider. "You're dating? Like boyfriend and girlfriend?" Hannah laughed, the sound a little watery. "Something like that, sweetheart. We're taking things slow, getting to know each other again. But yes, we're dating." The squeal that came out of Mia could probably have shattered glass. She launched herself at Hannah, nearly knocking her over, and then bounced back to Ryan to hug him just as fiercely. "This is the best day ever," she announced. "Are you getting married again? Can I be the flower girl? Can we all live together?" "Whoa, hold on," Ryan said, laughing despite himself. "We literally just started dating. We're not talking about marriage or living together. This is going to take time, princess." "How much time?" Mia demanded, echoing her earlier question about forgiveness with the same impatience. "We don't know," Hannah said gently, "but we promise to keep you updated along the way. And Mia? Nothing changes about how much we both love you, okay? Whether we're together or not, you're always going to be the most important person to both of us." Mia seemed to accept this, though Ryan could already see the wheels turning as she planned their future in her head. She chattered non-stop through dinner, already making lists of things they could do as a family, places they should go, activities they should try. Ryan and Hannah exchanged amused glances over her head, both thinking the same thing. They'd created a romantic in the form of a 5-year-old. After Mia finally went to bed, still talking about wedding dresses, even though they'd repeatedly told her they weren't anywhere near that point, Hannah lingered at the door. The goodbye felt weighted with new significance now that they'd named what was between them. "So," Hannah said, a shy smile playing at her lips, "when's our first official date?" "Are Wednesday dinners not dates?" Ryan teased. "Those are family dinners," Hannah corrected. "I want a real date, just us. Somewhere we can talk without worrying about little ears hearing everything." Ryan felt a flutter of nervousness in his stomach, the kind he hadn't experienced since he was a teenager. "Friday?" he suggested. "Sarah said she'd watch Mia any time I needed her to, and I think she'll be thrilled about this development." Friday is perfect, Hannah said. Then, with a boldness that surprised both of them, she stood on her toes and kissed him again, brief and sweet, but full of promise. Good night, Ryan. Good night, he managed, watching her walk to her car with a smile he couldn't have suppressed if he'd tried. The call to Sarah was exactly as Ryan expected. She answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting for news. Tell me everything, she demanded. We're dating, Ryan said, unable to keep the grin out of his voice. Hannah and I, we're officially dating. There was a long pause. And you're sure about this? You're really, truly sure? I'm terrified, Ryan admitted. But yes, I'm sure. Sarah sighed, and Ryan could picture her shaking her head. Then I'm happy for you, you idiot. You deserve happiness, even if you're choosing the most complicated path to get there. When do you need me to watch Mia? Friday night? We're going on our first real date. I'll be there, Sarah promised. And Ryan? For what it's worth, I think you're brave. Stupid, maybe, but brave. Friday arrived with the kind of nervous anticipation that made Ryan change his shirt 3 times and check his hair in the mirror more than any grown man should. He'd made reservations at a quiet Italian restaurant downtown, the kind of place that was romantic without being over the top, intimate without feeling like too much pressure. Sarah arrived early, took one look at Ryan's face, and laughed. You look like you're about to face a firing squad, not go on a date with a woman you've already been married to. That's what makes it terrifying, Ryan said, adjusting his collar for the 5th time. We know all the ways we failed before. What if we just fail again? Then you'll survive, like you did before, Sarah said matter-of-factly. But what if you don't fail? What if you actually get your happy ending? The question stayed with Ryan as he drove to pick up Hannah. She'd moved into a small apartment after settling Eleanor's estate, a place that was distinctly hers rather than haunted by her mother's illness. When she answered the door, Ryan momentarily forgot how to breathe. She was wearing a dark blue dress that brought out her eyes, her hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders, and she looked beautiful in a way that made Ryan remember exactly why he'd fallen in love with her in the first place. Hi, she said, her own nervousness evident in the way she clutched her purse. Hi, Ryan echoed. You look amazing. So do you, Hannah said, and the smile she gave him was genuine and warm and slightly shy, like they were discovering each other all over again. The restaurant was everything Ryan had hoped. Quiet enough for conversation, but busy enough that they weren't hyper-aware of being alone together. They started with safe topics: Mia's latest school adventures, Ryan's students, the book Hannah had been reading, but gradually, as the wine loosened their tongues and the atmosphere relaxed them, they ventured into deeper territory. I want to understand, Ryan said over their main course, setting down his fork to give the conversation his full attention. I want to understand what it was like for you. Not so I can hold it against you, but so I can really know what you went through. Hannah took a sip of wine, clearly gathering her thoughts. Do you remember how I was after Mia was born? How I'd just stare at the wall sometimes, or how I'd cry for no reason? Ryan nodded. He remembered, though he'd attributed it to exhaustion and hormones, normal new parent struggles. It felt like drowning, Hannah continued, her voice quiet but steady. Like I was underwater and everyone else was above the surface, living normally, and I couldn't figure out how to get up there with them. I'd look at Mia and feel this overwhelming love, but also this terror that I was going to fail her, that I was broken and defective and she deserved better. You weren't broken, Ryan said firmly. I know that now, Hannah said. But then, I believed it completely, and the worse I felt, the more I tried to hide it, because admitting I was struggling felt like admitting I was a terrible mother. So I just kept sinking deeper and deeper until one day I woke up and couldn't remember the last time I'd felt anything other than numb despair. Ryan reached across the table and took her hand, needing the physical connection. What made you finally leave? Was there a specific moment? Hannah's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. I was giving Mia a bath. She was 2, so full of energy and joy, and she was splashing and laughing, and I just felt nothing. I couldn't connect to her happiness. I couldn't feel the love I knew was supposed to be there. And I had this thought, this terrible, intrusive thought, that if something happened to her, I wouldn't even care because I couldn't feel anything at all. Ryan's grip on her hand tightened, He could see the shame in her face, the way she was bracing for his judgment or disgust. That thought terrified me, Hannah continued, tears spilling over now. Not because I wanted anything bad to happen, but because I realized how sick I was, how dangerous I might be, even though I'd never hurt her. I called my cousin that night, you remember Jessica? And I told her everything. She drove 6 hours to come get me, and she's the one who got me into therapy, who helped me understand I had postpartum depression. Why didn't you tell me any of this? Ryan asked, his voice breaking. Why didn't you let me help? Because I was convinced you'd be better off without me, Hannah said simply. Jessica tried to get me to call you, to explain, but I wouldn't. I was so deep in the depression that I genuinely believed leaving was an act of love, that I was protecting you and Mia from my brokenness. Ryan sat back, processing this. All the anger he'd carried, all the nights he'd wondered how Hannah could just abandon them. It had been predicated on the assumption that she'd left because she didn't care. But this was the opposite. She'd left because she'd cared too much to risk hurting them with her illness. It still wasn't right, Ryan said, needing to establish that boundary. I understand why you did it, but it still wasn't the right choice. We could have gotten through it together. I know, Hannah whispered. And if I could go back, I'd do everything differently. I'd be honest about struggling. I'd accept help. I'd trust that you loved me enough to support me through the darkness. But I can't go back, Ryan. I can only be better now. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the conversation settling around them. Then Ryan said something he'd been thinking about for weeks. I failed you too. I saw that you were struggling, and I didn't push hard enough to understand why. I let you deflect and make excuses because it was easier than confronting something I didn't know how to fix. You were a new parent trying to survive, Hannah said. You can't blame yourself for not diagnosing a medical condition. Maybe not, Ryan agreed, but I can acknowledge that if we're going to do this right, really right, we both need to be better at communicating, at being honest even when it's hard. I can do that, Hannah said, her voice stronger now. I want to do that. The rest of dinner was lighter, as if they'd cleared some essential hurdle and could now breathe easier. They talked about hopes for the future, cautiously, not making promises they couldn't keep, but exploring possibilities. They laughed about Mia's dramatic reaction to their dating announcement. They remembered good times from their marriage alongside the bad, reclaiming some of the joy that had been buried under pain. When Ryan walked Hannah to her door at the end of the night, the air between them felt electric with possibility. She turned to face him, her back against the door, and Ryan braced one hand on the doorframe above her head, not trapping her but creating a pocket of intimacy in the cool night air. I had a really good time tonight, Hannah said softly. Better than good. Perfect. Me too, Ryan admitted. Hannah, I need you to know I'm all in on this. It scares the hell out of me, but I'm all in. I'm going to try to trust you, to build something new with you. But I need you to promise that if you ever feel yourself slipping, if the depression comes back or things get too hard, you'll tell me. You'll let me help instead of running. I promise, Hannah said solemnly. Ryan, I've spent 3 years learning how to manage my mental health. I have a therapist I see weekly. I'm on medication that actually works. I have coping strategies and a support network. I'm not the same person who left, and I won't make the same mistakes. Ryan studied her face in the porch light, looking for any hint of uncertainty. He found only fierce determination and love. So much love it took his breath away. Okay, he said. Then let's do this. Let's build something new. He kissed her then, and it was different from the tentative kisses they'd shared before. This one was deeper, more certain, a promise sealed with touch. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Hannah was smiling through tears. Come to Sunday dinner? Ryan asked impulsively. Not Wednesday, Sunday. Make it 4 days a week instead of 1. Are you sure? Hannah asked, even as hope lit up her face. I'm sure, Ryan said. Slow doesn't mean we have to torture ourselves. It just means we're being thoughtful about how we move forward. Spring arrived gradually, winter releasing its grip 1 degree at a time. Hannah became a fixture in their lives. Not just Wednesday and Sunday dinners, but movie nights and trips to the park and lazy Saturday mornings where she'd arrive with donuts and coffee. She and Ryan went on dates every Friday, exploring their city like tourists discovering it for the first time, talking about everything and nothing, slowly stitching together the torn fabric of their relationship. There were hard moments, too. One Tuesday in March, Hannah called Ryan in tears, in the grip of a bad day where the depression had surged back without warning. Ryan's first instinct was panic. This was it, the moment where she'd run again. But instead, Hannah asked if he could come over, and when he arrived, she let him hold her while she cried and told him about the darkness that sometimes still clawed at her. "I'm not going anywhere, but," Hannah kept saying, like a mantra she needed to repeat. "I'm just having a bad day. I need you to know I'm having a bad day so you can help me through it instead of me trying to hide it." And Ryan did help. He held her and listened and didn't try to fix anything, just offered his presence and patience. When she felt steadier, he helped her call her therapist to schedule an emergency session. He picked up Mia from school so Hannah could rest. He proved, through action rather than words, that her illness didn't scare him away anymore because now he understood it and she'd let him in. That night, after Mia was asleep and Hannah had gone home with a medication adjustment plan and a promise to check in tomorrow, Ryan realized something profound. Love wasn't just the easy moments, the laughter and joy and connection. Love was also this, showing up on the hard days, offering support without judgment, choosing to stay when leaving would be simpler. In April, Ryan invited Hannah to his school's spring concert where Mia was singing with her kindergarten class. It was a small thing, but it felt significant. Hannah in the audience with the other parents, recording on her phone like she'd never missed a moment of their daughter's life. Afterward, when Mia ran up to them both with equal enthusiasm, chattering about how nervous she'd been and whether they'd heard her part, Hannah caught Ryan's eye over their daughter's head and smiled. This was what rebuilding looked like. Not grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but the accumulation of small moments that added up to something solid and real. One Saturday in May, nearly 6 months after that chance meeting in the mall, Hannah brought up the subject that had been hovering unspoken between them for weeks. They were at the park, watching Mia play on the swings with other children, and Hannah's hand was warm in Ryan's as they sat on a bench in the sunshine. "I've been thinking," Hannah started, then paused, clearly nervous about how to continue. "That's dangerous," Ryan teased, trying to lighten whatever heavy thing was coming. Hannah laughed, but pressed on. "I've been thinking about the future, about where this is going, and I know we said we'd take things slow, and I don't want to rush anything, but Ryan, I want more of this, more of us, more of being a family. I want to wake up in the same house as you and Mia. I want to be there for breakfast and bedtime stories and all the ordinary moments in between." Ryan's heart hammered in his chest. They'd been dancing around this conversation, both wanting it but afraid to voice it first. "Are you saying you want to move in?" "Eventually," Hannah clarified. "Not tomorrow, not even next month. But maybe we could start talking about it. About what that would look like, what boundaries we'd need, how we'd make sure Mia felt secure through the transition." Ryan turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "I want that too," he admitted. "God, Hannah, I've wanted it for weeks, but I was afraid to say it. Afraid you'd think I was moving too fast or that I was being naive." "You're not naive," Hannah said firmly. "You're hopeful, and hope is good. Hope is what's gotten us this far." They talked through the practical details. Hannah would keep her apartment for now as a safety net and a sign they were being thoughtful rather than impulsive. They'd start with Hannah staying over a few nights a week, letting Mia adjust gradually. If things continued to go well, they'd revisit the conversation about actually moving in together in a few months. But underneath the logistics was the real conversation, the one about commitment and trust and whether they believed in their ability to make this work long term. And to Ryan's surprise, he found that he did believe it. Not because the past had been erased or because everything was perfect, but because they'd both changed in the ways that mattered most. When they told Mia about the plan for Hannah to start staying over more, their daughter's reaction was predictably enthusiastic. "Does this mean we're a real family again?" she asked, her blue eyes, so like Hannah's, shining with hope. "We've always been a real family," Ryan said gently. "But yes, we're learning how to be the kind of family that lives together again." "Good," Mia said with satisfaction, "because I was getting tired of saying goodbye to Mommy all the time." The transition was smoother than Ryan had dared to hope. Hannah fit back into their rhythms as if she'd never left, but with an awareness and gratitude for the privilege of being included. She did bedtime duty with the reverence of someone who'd lost years of it. She made pancakes on Saturday mornings and laughed when Mia critiqued her technique compared to Daddy's. She joined them for school drop-offs and parent-teacher conferences, and all the mundane, beautiful moments that made up a life. There were adjustments, of course. Times when Ryan had to remind himself that Hannah's way of doing things wasn't wrong, just different. Moments when Hannah felt like an intruder in a home that Ryan and Mia had built without her, and had to be reminded that she was wanted. But they talked through it all, committed to the communication they'd promised each other. In July, on a humid evening with fireflies lighting up the backyard, Ryan found himself standing at the kitchen window watching Hannah and Mia catch lightning bugs in a jar. Mia's laughter carried through the screen, and Hannah's answering giggle sounded young and free, like the woman Ryan had married before life got complicated. Sarah, visiting for the weekend, came to stand beside him. "You did it," she said quietly. "You actually pulled off the impossible." "What's that?" Ryan asked, though he knew what she meant. "You forgave her, really forgave her. Not the kind of forgiveness that's really just pretending nothing happened, but the kind that acknowledges the pain and chooses love anyway." Ryan watched Hannah lift Mia up so she could reach a higher firefly, their silhouettes dark against the twilight sky. "She made it easy," he said. "She did the work. She showed up. She proved she was different." "You both did the work," Sarah corrected. "Don't sell yourself short. You could have stayed angry forever and no one would have blamed you. Instead, you chose to be brave." That night, after Mia was asleep and Sarah had gone to the guest room, Ryan and Hannah sat on the back porch swing, moving gently in the humid air. Hannah's head rested on Ryan's shoulder, his arm around her waist, and it felt so natural that Ryan could almost forget they'd ever been apart. "I have something I need to say," Hannah said suddenly, sitting up to face him. In the dim porch light, her expression was serious, almost nervous. Ryan's stomach clenched. After months of things going well, he'd been waiting for the other shoe to drop. "Okay," he said carefully. Hannah took a deep breath. "I want you to know that I see what you've done. Not just agreeing to date me or letting me back into Mia's life, but the way you've loved me through my bad days. The way you've chosen to trust me even when it scared you. The way you've made space for me in the life you built without ever making me feel like I was erasing what you and Mia created together." "Hannah," Ryan started, but she held up a hand. "Let me finish," she said. "You would have been completely justified in never forgiving me, in letting me have a relationship with Mia but nothing more. And I would have accepted that, would have been grateful for even that much. But you gave me more. You gave me another chance at love, at family, at being whole. And I need you to know that I will never take that for granted. Not ever." Ryan felt his throat tighten with emotion. "You've earned it," he said roughly. "Every day you've earned it." "I want to keep earning it," Hannah said. "For the rest of my life, I want to keep earning it. Ryan Walker, I know we're taking things slow. I know we're not rushing into anything, but I need you to know, when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I want to marry you again. I want to make vows we actually keep this time. I want to build a life that nothing can tear apart because we've learned how to weather the storms together." The proposal, if that's what it was, caught Ryan completely off guard. His first instinct was to be cautious, to say it was too soon, to protect himself from the vulnerability of saying yes. But then he looked at Hannah's face, saw the hope and fear and love shining there, and realized that caution had gotten him nowhere good. It was courage that had brought them to this porch, this moment, this second chance at happiness. "Ask me again in 6 months," Ryan said, watching Hannah's face fall with disappointment before he continued. "And the answer will be yes. I want to marry you again, Hannah. I want to stand up in front of everyone we know and promise to love you through everything, the good and the bad, the easy and the hard. But I want us to have a year of this first. A year of proving we can do the everyday boring stuff without falling apart. Because marriage isn't the grand gestures. It's the Tuesday afternoons and the Sunday mornings, and knowing that we can survive both." Hannah's face transformed, disappointment giving way to radiant joy. 6 months, she agreed. "I can wait 6 months." I'd wait forever if that's what you needed. I don't need forever, Ryan said, pulling her close. Just 6 more months of us figuring out how to be a family. And then Hannah? Then I want to make you my wife again, and this time we'll get it right. They kissed under the stars, the summer night wrapping around them like a blessing. Inside the house, Mia slept peacefully, unaware that her parents had just promised each other a future. But she'd know soon enough. She'd be there when they said their vows again, old enough this time to remember, to understand what it meant when 2 people chose each other despite everything that had tried to tear them apart. The next 6 months passed in a blur of ordinary, extraordinary moments. Hannah officially moved in on a cool October morning, her belongings minimal because she said she wanted to blend into the life Ryan and Mia had built rather than disrupting it. They rearranged closets and drawers, making space for her things alongside theirs, and it felt less like an invasion and more like finally becoming complete. Mia started first grade and thrived, her confidence bolstered by having both parents there to cheer her on. Hannah joined the PTA and volunteered in Mia's classroom, building relationships with the other parents who'd only known Ryan as the dedicated single dad. There was gossip, inevitably, whispers about the wife who'd left and come back, but Hannah faced it with grace and honesty, never hiding from her past but refusing to be defined by it either. Ryan proposed properly in December, on Christmas Eve, in the same mall food court where they'd run into each other a year earlier. He told Hannah he wanted to go shopping, dragged her to the spot where Mia had first hugged her mother, and dropped to one knee in front of curious shoppers and twinkling Christmas lights. "A year ago in this exact spot, you came back into our lives," Ryan said, his voice steady despite the tears gathering in his eyes. "And I thought it would destroy me. I thought I'd never survive having you close enough to lose again. But Hannah, you didn't destroy me. You rebuilt me. You taught me that love is braver than fear, that forgiveness is stronger than anger, that second chances are real if you're willing to fight for them." He pulled out a ring, not the same one from their first marriage, but something new, something that represented who they'd become rather than who they'd been. "Hannah Foster, will you marry me? Not because we're trying to reclaim the past, but because we're choosing to build a future?" Hannah was crying too hard to speak at first. Finally, she managed a watery, "Yes, yes, yes, yes," and Ryan slipped the ring onto her finger while the crowd around them burst into applause. Mia, who'd been hiding behind a pillar with Sarah filming the whole thing, came running out screaming, "She said yes! Mommy said yes!" as if there'd been any doubt. They got married the following spring, in the same church where they'd buried Eleanor, but with all the sadness replaced by joy. It was a small ceremony, just family and close friends, people who'd supported them through the darkness and deserved to celebrate the light. Mia was the flower girl, resplendent in a dress she'd picked out with Hannah, and she took her duties with deadly seriousness. When Ryan and Hannah exchanged vows, they didn't use the traditional words. Instead, they spoke promises forged in fire. To communicate even when it was hard, to ask for help instead of suffering in silence, to remember that being a family meant showing up on the worst days as well as the best ones. "I promise to love you through the darkness," Hannah said, tears streaming down her face, "and to trust you enough to bring you into that darkness with me instead of facing it alone. I promise to be patient when patience is hard," Ryan said, "and to remember that loving you means accepting all of you, the light and the shadow, the strength and the struggle." When they kissed, sealing vows that meant so much more than the ones they'd spoken 8 years earlier, Mia cheered louder than anyone. At the reception, held in Sarah's backyard under strings of lights that made everything look magical, Ryan found himself standing with Hannah and Mia, the 3 of them watching people dance and celebrate and toast to their happiness. His arm was around Hannah's waist, her head on his shoulder, Mia pressed against his other side, and Ryan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Complete. Whole. Home. "What are you thinking?" Hannah asked softly. Ryan considered the question. He thought about that Christmas Eve in the mall, about the terror he'd felt seeing Hannah again, about the long, painful journey from anger to understanding to love. He thought about the bad days they'd weathered and the good days they'd celebrated, and all the ordinary days in between that had added up to something extraordinary. "I'm thinking about something Mia said that first night," Ryan admitted. "When you came to Christmas dinner, remember? We were in the living room and she was falling asleep, and she said we were family. I remember, Hannah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She was right, Ryan said simply. Even when we were broken and scattered and didn't know how to be together, we were still family. We just had to find our way back to each other. Hannah turned to kiss him, a quick press of lips that tasted like tears and champagne and promise. Thank you, she whispered against his mouth. Thank you for finding your way back to me. Thank you for doing the work to be someone worth finding, Ryan replied. Mia, who'd been eavesdropping shamelessly, squeezed between them. Are you guys being mushy again? She asked, but she was grinning. Always, Ryan confirmed, pulling both his girls close. Get used to it. And there, surrounded by friends and family, with spring flowers blooming and lights twinkling overhead, and the future stretching bright and uncertain before them, Ryan Walker realized something profound. Forgiveness wasn't weakness. Trust wasn't foolishness. And love, real love, the kind that survived loss and pain and 3 years of absence, wasn't about never falling apart. It was about choosing to put the pieces back together, different than before but somehow stronger for having been broken and remade. They'd lost years they could never get back. But they had all the years ahead of them, and that was more than enough. It was everything. As the party continued around them, Ryan looked up at the stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. The same stars that had watched them fall apart and now watched them come back together. And he made a silent promise to whatever force had given them this second chance. He wouldn't waste it. He'd cherish every ordinary moment, weather every storm, and love Hannah and Mia with everything he had for as long as he lived. The story that began with a little girl saying 2 words in a mall food court, "We're family," had come full circle. Because Mia had been right all along. They'd always been family. They just needed time, healing, and the courage to fight for each other to remember it. And now, finally, they